we needed a part 2, and it was just too much shit for me to get involved with. And I came across Austin, and I was like, fuck it, I'll just revisit it and have him do it. So, yeah. And Julia has also covered it herself. So I was like, why not get them both on? We could just do the show that way. So we got Julia from Cosmic Peach joining us. What is going on, Julia? How are you?
What's up? Yeah, we just recently did a little bit of a cult episode, me and my husband Colby. So Solar Temple was not one that we mentioned in this episode, but I'm very excited to get into it today. And obviously Cosmic Peach Podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts, excited to be here.
Awesome. Hell yeah. Thank you. And we got JJ Vance with us today. What is going on, sir? How are you?
Nick, greetings, sir. Appreciate the invite as always. Julia and Heidi, always great to join you fellow cult rejects for a conversation on cults, especially. And Austin Wade Picard, greetings, sir. Welcome back to another conversation here. I always enjoy the barn burner conversations we have here, including we've already started that here in the pre-show today. But JJ Vance, host of Operation GCD, and not the vice president, and looking for the conversation.
Oh yeah, thank you very much. And we got Heidi from whatever. Heidi, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Heidi Love. Yes. Thank you. I'm glad to be back and happy to be here with all the occult rejects. Happy to see you, Nick, and nice to meet you, Austin. I am at Unfiltered Rise Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Check me out.
Oh yeah, thank you very much. And we were supposed to have Ricardo on with us today. If he doesn't make it, I'll just plug it anyway. Ricardo from Natural Philosophy. I think maybe I might have screwed up the timing or something, but yeah, he was supposed to join us. He may jump in case he does, and I don't want to interrupt the show. I just plugged this stuff right there, so we're good. And then finally, to the guest himself, somebody that after I'm on Fridays was like, I definitely got to get this man on the show. And again, like I said, he covered the Solar Temple, and I would assume if he covered it like other topics I've seen him cover, he probably did a really fucking good job. So here we are. We got Austin. What is going on, sir? Let everybody know. May not know who you are yet, where they can find your work.
I appreciate you guys, honestly, for having me on. Just being willing to have another one of these conversations, right? Where we kind of, I don't know, find ourselves in this sort of just very much unexpected underground network of seemingly like so much of the connections seem to bridge at this intersection with right clandestine operations, occult organizations, and this deliberate sort of, in my mind, there's always some sort of intelligence apparatus involved in sort of the occult organizations aspect of things. But anyway, the point before I get into the OTS, I should introduce myself. So everybody, I started the Underclass podcast in like I believe it was April of 2023. So it's still, I feel like, very much in its infancy. But yeah, I don't know. I never expected to find myself here, to be honest, because I did begin my very first episode with Operation MK Ultra. So it makes a lot of sense now in hindsight, right? that I would find myself in this position as far as many of the different subjects and topics that I've been kind of overexposed to now, which I don't know. You can never really be too overexposed to this because there are so many deep layered connections to all these these basically criminal enterprises that are seemingly being facilitated, propped up, and covered up as well after the fact. But anyway, point being, I'm always tending to kind of dive deeper into the alternative theories to a lot of these, very much recent historical scandals that have I think been misrepresented by design, right? And in order to sort of keep the veil in place in terms of, right, just kind of just the average individual, and the ideologically subverted and imprisoned individual who seems to not be able to see straight due to partisan politics and the two-party delusion. They're very much falling victim to right this sort of manufactured trap. And so I'm just
Netflix documentaries.
Exactly burying the lead, limited hangouts,
part of the magic show, right? The propaganda campaign we're all subjected to, right?
Yep.
Sometimes you're actually promoting the cults more than if anything.
Well, yeah, it's
On
part
the
of a marketing
Netflix
campaign, right?
documentary?
Yeah, I think it's more of like it's probably more
Yeah.
people interested in looking
Yeah.
into it in a fucked up way than actually.
Well, I like your pen post on your Twixter profile there, Austin, from the CIA director Ronald Reagan. If you don't mind sharing that one.
Right. Yeah. If everything the American public believes is false, right? That is when their disinformation campaign will be complete.
That's where we're at.
Yeah,
We're
and
right
that is
there.
exactly where we're at, right? And I just think they've kind of overachieved in more ways than one in my mind, and I think that honestly, it's so, as far as just the tools they have in place to facilitate these agendas and kind of pursue the dystopian totalitarian tiptoe, it's on this kind of repeating cycle where, unfortunately, as I mentioned, the average person can't seem to interpret this in real time, right? And so it's just they're in this over emotional reactive state of mind, and I think that's always being exploited and leveraged against them. And that's why I feel very much as if, and the reason I named my podcast The Underclass was just because I felt entirely disillusioned by the process just in general. And then philosophically, I just fell out of the idea that I even would want representation. But you know what I mean? It's just like at a certain point, I would just prefer to attempt to pursue like some sort of individual sovereignty as much as I personally can at a just like in real terms that I can apply with, as far as just outlining your core principles matters more than anything. And I think again, that's why I'm super grateful that I have opportunities like this, like-minded individuals, where I don't feel so isolated in my ideas, and that's what drove me to start the show more than anything was I wanted to continue to grow and learn more about these things, but present them in a way that I felt like I would listen to other shows and listen to certain, just investigative deep dives on some of these topics. And I always wanted to somehow, how can I wanted to bridge the gap on certain areas where I wanted to provide credibility more to the conspiracy aspect of things, where people seem to, dismiss things more at face value. I want to kind of like reinforce the ideas in a credible way as much as I possibly can, with providing context and a comprehensive outline, hopefully, that will reinforce and reiterate a lot of this corroborating evidence, right? And then it almost becomes undeniable, and you're not just sitting there making these claims and allegations and that are kind of just, not at all backed by as far as like, I'm not saying that it just, as far as I'm concerned, there is so much truth to a lot of these alternative theories that I just would like to bolster a lot of that evidence as much as I possibly can. And I, more than anything, what appeals to me is the plight of, unfortunately, the most vulnerable among us, right? And that tends to be just like the complete and total abuse of and sadistic abuse of children, right? And so that tends to be involved in more ways than one in many of these occult organizations. And that also happens to come up in the Order of the Solar Temple, right? Wouldn't you know?
Yeah.
But yeah.
Let me ask you, how did you get to the Solar Temple when you were done?
So I did my Jonestown episode, and that's kind of what like launched me further into. Now I knew of Franklin, and I knew the Finders really was the one that I was just like, what has happened here, right? Like, this is legitimately, I just took what Ted Gunderson had to say about the Finders. And honestly, it's a lot of, and I will say, I think there's a point to be made as far as questioning the credibility and of certain individuals, but I have no reason.
Ted Gunderson?
Like Ted Gunderson. Yeah,
Okay. Absolutely. Like everybody, yeah, obviously Ted Gunderson, former head of COINTELPRO.
Right, exactly.
Who thought he was going to be the FBI director after Hoover?
Right. For sure. But, I discovered, right, this alleged mass hysteria, satanic panic, right? And in reality, I was unaware of the fact that there was clearly much more to that than as far as legitimately there are obviously real examples of satanic ritual abuse that was conducted. I mean, people like to talk about McMartin and dismiss that case, but my God, man! I mean, you look at I mean, the Presidio, right, in San Francisco, and you see what was happening. It wasn't just McMartin in Manhattan Beach. You know, this was more than one child care facility that was being entirely exploited, and they had underground tunnels connecting to neighboring properties. And this was all filled in with a foreign dirt source that was then legitimately revealed later on with actual experts who went and did a professional dig. And it's just whenever
you're talking about the underground tunnels and
the McMartin preschool. Yeah,
I think you had a very salient characteristic there in the satanic panic nonsense. And when you said it wasn't just Presidio, and then I think McMartin's kind of role, it is legitimate. I'm not saying that, but I think it's also used for a passion in which to bastardize this entire narrative, right, and confuse everybody. Because you're right, it wasn't just Presidio. So I've tracked 7 other Army daycare centers at the very same time that were under scandals such as West Point.
Yep, exactly.
At the same time as Presidio.
I know, and I covered a little bit of the West Point scandal as well. It's one of the most disturbing cases, man. Just like the Presidio, and we're talking.
The fact that the Army IG's office would just just look the other way when you have. I mean, I think it's over a dozen. I have at least 7 right now besides Presidio. So at the very same time, it's the same pattern of behavior, and at the base, it never goes past the base level, right? It never goes above that installation commander.
Yeah, and that's
so. Looking into Presidio and McMartin led you to the solar temple?
I'm telling you, this it's so essentially when I found Jonestown, and I realized that Congressman Leo Ryan's aide William Holsinger, essentially, he had made a claim that he feared that the CIA might have been running a covert operation at Jonestown that so sinister it would shock even hardened CIA watchdogs. And Holsinger in 1980, right, he says that he had already discovered Richard Dwyer's presence at Jonestown, who was the CIA asset and clearly a CIA operative who was not only at Port Cayuma airstrip when Congressman Leo Ryan was executed by the Red Brigade and what was described as like robot assassins under mind control who went down there. And Larry Layton was the individual, the only one who ever got charged. And this dude, legitimately, he was under mind control and had connections to his father ran basically this. He was running the psychological warfare program as far as the medical aspect of it at. Oh shit! I forget the actual location, but I don't want to get too much into Jonestown. The point being here is just that basically this professor sent from UC Berkeley sent a paper called The Penal Colony to William Holsinger after all this occurred in 78, I believe is when they all the alleged mass suicide took place, which is another perfect example, right? Because this is what we're supposed to consider the OTS as a doomsday cult, right? And that committed mass suicide and revolutionary mass suicide, which is just it's just laughable after you get into the details.
Well, they forgot their purple, their purple robes and their black Nikes is the problem, I think.
Right. But yeah, multiple countries, right, and are involved, and it's extraordinary as far as the details of this story. But in terms of the Penal Colony paper, this detailed how the CIA mind control program MKUltra was not stopped in 73, but had been driven underground, right? And so the CIA had told Congress, obviously, they stopped MKUltra in 1973, but instead. It was
Can we unpack
underground.
that for a second there, Austin, if you don't mind? Like when we say the CIA told Congress, I mean, that was a pretty seminal event in not only our American government, but also in, within the CIA hierarchy. There were a lot of folks got fired after that. And no one really discovered anything because when Congress said, if Congress said, bring in the paperwork there to the director whose name's escaped me.
Richard Helms, I know.
Richard Helms, thank you, sir, yeah.
But Richard Helms, for sure, he ordered the destruction of thousands of files, and so we will never know.
After he was told to bring it into Congress, right? And exactly. Did he ever get held accountable for that?
Absolutely not. No, no.
Nope.
And that's it's people don't realize that Watergate happened around this time as well, right? It wasn't and so
Well,
it's
yeah, Watergate, and then we
Yeah.
get the Ford Nelson Rockefeller administration, and then
100%, man. Yeah.
and then Ford fires everybody in November of 75 because two Manson girls just happened to almost make Nelson Rockefeller the president in September of 75. Between two different mind control assassination attempts on Ford 3 weeks apart in California. And then Ford fires everybody. And then we get, I don't think Ford knew necessarily, maybe he did, but I don't think he did. You think he was kind of dumb. Then we get George Bush, we get George Bush in the CIA. So that whole transitionary period within that 2-year period of the 70s is fucking weird.
It's strange as hell. And I'm telling you, and as far as, obviously MK Ultra was driven underground, but I mean, the same goes for like people act as if Operation Mockingbird ceased to exist. Like, I mean, that's clearly not the case, right? I mean, the mainstream media has been entirely just subverted for generations. And this is why we have to reside in the alternative media landscape. It's up to people like us to have any real conversation and pry below the surface at any real level to actually provide some context to any of this. But so what I found most interesting about this point, though, and the reason I brought it up was just because it reported that merely it was basically driven into public hospitals and prisons. But it was more so they began to prioritize after 73 the secure confines of these religious cults. And Holsinger believed, along with this penal colony UC Berkeley professor, that Jonestown obviously was one of these cults that were firmly, as far as in terms of just being affiliated with Project MK Ultra, obviously were a major part. And that, it makes all the sense in the world, in my opinion, right? As far as if you think about what Colonel Bo Gritz had to say about Jonestown, it's very interesting because he was
Henry Lee Lucas.
Bo Gritz.
Oh, yeah.
Bo Gritz. Yeah. Oh man,
Yeah.
I just got educated on some Bo Gritz the other day, how deep he was in the Operation Patcon stuff.
Oh man, so former Green Beret, as far as U.S. Army Special Forces officer. I think he even trained the Afghan Mujahideen in the domestic U.S. on black sites.
there you go. And he's listed. He's listed heavily in the PatCon documents as one of the redacted names.
Of course, man. That's why he was up there in Ruby Ridge.
There you go.
The PatCon operation. And Bo Gritz is up there as the negotiator with Randy Weaver, who I read this crazy ass story about how potentially, this Paul Wiltshire report was saying that that was sent to Attorney General Janet Reno at the time. And then Paul Wiltshire was effectively assassinated, and he was a journalist that was on the White House press team even for a time, and he was executed. His body was then moved, and then he was and obviously they claimed he committed suicide. But his bowels had been released at a separate location. They claimed that he committed suicide on his own toilet, and that just did not happen. And
I don't know that case. That sounds very interesting because Merrick Garland was her number 2. Janet Reno's number 2.
Oh yeah, dude, 100%. But you know what this dude said? He said, this is all around the time of Danny Castellero's Octopus, right? And he said, I know just as much, if not more, than Danny did. And this is right before his death. And he was talking to it's a real crazy name.
Who was this guy again? Can you spell his name for me real
Paul
quick?
Wiltshire. Paul Wiltshire. Yeah. That's his name. It's Paul and Wilcher.
Yeah.
And
I'm going to post something in the chat for folks to look at here with some of this stuff. Please continue.
Gunther Russbacher, all right, is the CIA covert operative that he was involved with having as far as like who was providing him with many of these details. It wasn't him alone, but he said Gunther Russbacher said that he was being targeted and prioritized because as far as being hung out to dry, but also they were potentially targeting him for assassination because he knew too much and was willing to blow the whistle. And he was allegedly the one who flew George Bush Sr., William Casey. There was a whole list of who was on the flight that he flew to Paris for because this was all about the October surprise and the hostage negotiation crisis. Right, and he claimed to be the covert operative who flew George Bush Sr. to Paris, and along with all these other spooks. And
you mean to tell me Jimmy Carter's cousin Barry Seal was too busy to fly him?
Yeah, right. Hey, Tosh Plumlee says that
who used to work for Howard Hughes, right? Didn't he get his start flying for Howard Hughes?
Which, by the way, Nixon is the one who he basically triggered. He called in Howard Hughes to essentially provide plausible deniability within the private sector and stage all of these domestic black sites within the U.S. And that was that legitimately happened when Nixon was VP.
Do you know who Nixon's godfather is?
Who is it?
Elmer Bobst. You know who it is, right?
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah, just so you know.
Yeah, man.
Who has ties to Martha Bell Mitchell, Knights of the Black Sun.
Exactly.
It's pretty fun. That's a fun rabbit hole to go down. Just
and I believe what's the damn guy's name? Not only was it so Nixon had two individuals in his administration that were affiliated with P2, right? And so there's the circle, right? They were all connected.
That goes right back to BCCI when you get to the P2 Vatican Bank scandal, because the Vatican Bank was co-owners with the CIA and BCCI. Back to all the same drug trafficking we were just talking about.
To the OTS.
There you go. Circling right back.
OTS was founded in about 1984, correct? And around Geneva.
Right.
You think you can get us to there?
Yeah, for sure, man. So I think it's really interesting because the way I kind of describe the OTS when I did my episode on this was it introduced me to much more of this in sort of the fashion of the Marc Dutroux case, this hidden surreptitious infrastructure intended to alter the political fabric of global society, right? And this draws in the unholy alliance aspect, right, of the organized crime syndicates, esoteric occult secret societies, clandestine global intelligence operations, right, and so the cloak and dagger methods, and that's what I believe is happening with the Order of the Solar Temple. But the way that we could really kind of begin at the very least is introduce the fact that the Solar Temple was considered to be just an esoteric new religious movement, secret society, described as a doomsday cult, right? As I mentioned earlier, but it's most known for the mass deaths that occurred in all these incidents throughout the 90s. And so they claim to base their ideals off of the Knights Templar and incorporated this strange mix of Rosicrucianism, theosophy, and really many different New Age ideas were involved, like even the Luciferian International. I didn't realize the Green Order was involved, and you have
had to put you on the spot. Did you get these notes from a book? Because what you just said was literally word for word from a thing I'm reading on my end. Same fucking note.
Yeah. No, this is so. No, this is legitimately.
Yeah, we both read the same book.
The Order of the Solar Temple, Order du Temple Solaire. OTS. Yeah, dude. Mm-hmm. It's crazy, but
a lot of fucking shit in that book.
It's so good, but there's also two different books. One of them has barely even been translated from French, right? And that's what a lot of these different resource materials that have been provided on the OTS entirely have are the same thing goes with researching the Nazi occult aspect of things. You can't get a translated copy. It's very difficult, and I think that's by design as well. It's kind of how they paywall resources that are very important, especially you think of like Chet Detlinger's book The List on the Atlanta case. It's like $400, and so that's just another example of how they kind of you
might find this interesting, but when I was doing my research on the Solar Temple, I actually came across the topic because old ass episode of Ancient Aliens came on, and it was all about the fucking solar temple. They were saying that these assholes were communicating with extraterrestrial beings, and a UFO cult that they were channeling and like doing all this stuff. And I was like, what is this shit? Because I know that Ancient Aliens has a way of portraying things that's kind of true but also kind of retarded. So I went and I did my own research into it, and it's kind of like what you guys are saying. There's like 1 or 2 books on it, not a lot of info. But I do know based on my research that they had like a big hard on for like Alice Bailey, and they were heavily influenced by like new age esoteric kind of like merging Knights Templar and Alice Bailey and Rosicrucianism, like and they all fucked and had a hybrid baby that ended up killing itself at the end of the story, kind of thing.
What it became was Rosicrucians merge with the Knights Templar, adopt this new age esoteric occult philosophy influenced by aspects of not only Christianity but Freemasonry. They also believed
Catholicism
and they believed in the spiritual over the secular traditions, is what they would say. And they even allegedly what they were preparing for was this what they referred to as the solar god king. All right. And this was what members referred to as like the Jesus Christ model. Right. And that essentially there was even mention of a what was an immaculate conception. Right. Which makes a lot of sense as far as like one of these. I forget the they basically abused this child, made the child wear gloves and a helmet and like all this weird shit. It was very strange. But
are you talking about the one cult leader's daughter?
Yeah,
they named her Emmanuel.
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 Oh my God. And by the way, they claimed that there was a false prophet of one of the other members had a child, and they were practicing this insane cosmic coupling is what they called it. Right. And so they would just like, no, you're no longer married. You're going to marry this person and you're going to have a child with this person. And so it
sounds like a Twin Flames business, Julie, that we
Twin Flames cult. Today. You remember from my episode when I talked about that?
Yeah,
I was just about to say that it's very Twin Flames cultish. Yeah,
I started reading about it. That's exactly what does it take. You just outlined the orchestration and structure of this Twin Flames cult too, as they're describing it.
Yeah, they took it a piece off of these people.
If anybody wants to look at the Vallow case, it's also very similar.
Like it's the same thing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. A lot of times I think these are extensions of the same network. They just, it's an egotistical driven, environment where they're just like, well, I'm going to name my own thing now.
Right.
Yeah, it fits into these boxes.
That maybe they try to produce
these people
stuff, right? They're easy to manipulate.
Oh, what's that, Nick? I missed that.
Maybe they try to produce these people themselves because they're easy to manipulate. Look at those people. They're all like fucking think they're this and that or something else. And
dude, I have no doubt. I'm working on this right now. What you're saying right now, I have no doubt there's something to it because I'm quite confident Zizian's father was a hippie out of a commune in California.
Right.
Yeah, I'm like this close to confirming that right now. So
some weird shit like that.
The weird AI professor daddy's got up there at University of Alaska Fairbanks, and I'm not diminishing the folks at University of Alaska Fairbanks. I do know 2 very creepy professors at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. One of which is a Satanist. Probably the other one probably is too. But
and you always want to look at the people that are taking care of these people, like Rockefeller, like Hughes. They're Mormons.
It's generational, right? So I'm assuming the Zithlor got born into it, right? Just like all these Mormon families get born into it, right, Heidi?
Yep. It's all the same thing. They just hit it. They hit it. When I'm studying Onassis, and he's going to come up, I'm sure. I'll let Austin continue on, but Onassis pops up in the middle of all of this. So that's why I said it ties everything. Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, I'm not shocked at all. I know that even the in total, I believe it was 77, which is occult numerology in general, right? As far as the total number of deaths, and then the 54 in Charleroi, that was entirely based on the obviously what was. I think it's important to realize that Jacques Breyer and all these interesting connections to clearly the 13, 10, 54 Knights, right? Who had basically there was this arrest that happened in mass, right? What was it? King Philip IV, I believe, of France. And essentially there was, the Knights Templar had inspired all of this. These European rulers were essentially kind of cracking down on the Knights Templar at this time, right? And they basically martyred these 54 knights. And so then I guess 4 years after this happened, where they're burned alive at the stake, right, in 1310, it turns out that the Grand Master of the Order and provincial leader was also burned alive, right? And so those fires set or attempted by Solar Temple members during all the murder-suicide incidents seem to have been directly inspired by the fiery deaths of the original Templars, which makes a lot of sense as far as, like, at the very least, what they were attempting to stage this as far as the framework of the narrative. Because in my mind, I don't believe that. Now we can get into the details of how the bodies were discovered and, like, the actual shot. You can clearly see that most of them were obviously murdered, right? And others were potentially forced at gunpoint to just drink the poison, right? Is essentially what had happened. And then their bodies were strategically arranged. They didn't fall like that in these geometric patterns. It clearly shows that, and they're symbolic in nature as well, right? With the and they were in hideaways as well when they were discovered, in this red room that had like a pentagram on the floor under an altar, which is just fascinating stuff. But I don't know that. But beyond that, you have these sophisticated displays of holographic special effects, which one of the members was an expert and apparently had a Hollywood background in special effects and was providing these displays, right, during their occult ritual performances. Essentially is what was happening, where they would meet with the ascended masters, okay, and the ascended masters would come into, it was basically Tupac holograms, right? But like way before its time. It is pretty incredible stuff, honestly. And that, I believe that was Michelle Tabachnik, who was the special effects operator who inevitably left the group. He fled the group, and I believe he was actually the one who birthed the child who was believed to have been, and they made the mistake of naming their child Emmanuel as well. And that was allegedly fulfilling the prophecy of this solar god king. And so at least it was clearly it was disrupting the current what Joseph de Membro was attempting to pursue in terms of this prophecy of the solar god king with his own child, which he had with this drug addicted woman who was, basically kind of entirely conned into having a sexual experience with Joseph de Membro and birthing a child for this very purpose. And so whenever this took place, Michelle Tabachnik takes this his wife and his kid, and they leave the group, and then just before all these murders take place, a group of Solar Temple members go to Michelle Tabachnik's house and brutally murder all three of them: the mother, the father, and the child, and made a legitimate example out of the child as far as the brutal slaying of that particular individual. And I think that is due to the fact of the disruption of the potential prophecy, which was very interesting. At the very least, you can tell that there was for sure, a lot of politics playing out in terms of the leadership involved, because you had members like these were not just, it's crazy to me because you had they weren't just recruiting anyone, you know what I mean? Like, you had very wealthy individual members. You had like one guy owned this, he was like a watchmaker, and I'm talking very wealthy, right? And essentially Joseph de Membro and Luc Jouret both had basically convinced a lot of the members to, very much in the fashion of Jim Jones in a way, to sign much of their property and just right and basically give power of attorney to Joseph de Membro, and it was just crazy how much
scam artist too, kind of. right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they were, and I mean, DeMambro himself, right? He had sampled a variety of esoteric groups at by that time, right? Including
that's another thing. This was like multiple attempts by this point.
I think this was the third cult that he had started. There was one like Golden Temple or like Golden Triangle or something like that.
It was the Golden Way. Yeah, I think it was the Golden Way. Yeah.
The Golden Way founded. Yeah.
The Golden Fang. Stupid. But yeah, you know, he definitely was affiliated with Amorc as well, the ancient mystical order of the Rosicrucis and Rosicrucis. And yeah. So,
but it goes further than that, right? Because it goes to Cagliostro, which is Martinists. And nobody brings that up.
100%.
I heard you talk about it though.
It's fascinating. I just like, it's really like, I don't know. There's so many layers to this story. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's kind of difficult. I didn't even realize that there was Joseph DeMambro had an Israel connection, by the way, which blew me away. And I thought it was kind of hilarious because in like 1966, he successfully swindles and defrauds the co-owner of this jewelry store. All right. This jewelry business. It was a technician by the name of Albert Boiron. I don't know exactly how to pronounce it, but DeMambro, he then just vanishes, right, with all the company's valuable assets and moves his entire family to Tel Aviv, claiming that his child, being born in Israel, would grant it an exceptional destiny. And he later claimed to members of the OTS that the reason he had actually been in Israel was that he had been asked by the chief rabbi to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem for pay. And he claims he refused payment as he was not interested in money. And then moved back to France by 72. But it's a crazy, you know, why would he be?
He's just a kind philanthropist. You know what I mean?
Right.
He's just out there doing the Lord's work.
Right.
But
he was impersonating a psychiatrist at times. He was sentenced in 72, I believe, 6 months. Yeah, in prison for breaching patient trust.
Impersonating a psychiatrist? You mean he had no education or training in such a matter? He's just printing degrees?
Yep, I'm telling you, man.
That's precisely what Edward Wayne Edwards did it for decades across America. Printed psychiatry degrees and faked to be a psychiatrist.
That's amazing.
Like Dr. Phil.
Right.
that creepy son of a bitch. He might have. He's probably murdered dozens. Probably. I don't have any evidence of this.
Look at his bald head and his stupid face. Of
Look
course
at his living room. Have I taken you on a tour of his home? If not, we'll do that in a future show, Julie, because it's fucking creepy.
Well, I believe it, but
a little weird.
It's a nightmare horror house, like mirror fucking smoke show funhouse situation. Because like
and his wife
situation.
His wife is, I think, a tranny, but that's besides the point.
Well, I didn't know that. In fact, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
I'm not kidding you. Just like Nicole
Julia's
Brown
dropping
Simpson.
bombs. She's dropping tranny bombs. Go, Julia.
I love to drop tranny bombs, but what are the odds that in the same year, right, 1994, Heaven's Gate and the Order of the Solar Temple go down? Like I want to say a couple months apart from each other. Like, what are the fucking odds of that too? That's
Not
always
Heaven's
stood
Gate,
out
right?
to me too. Heaven's Gate and the Order of the Solar Temple went down in 94,
right?
No, 94, both of them.
Well, in the tape that mentions
the Heaven's Gate
too. Yeah. No,
am I getting my 90s? Am I that big? I'm getting my 90s mixed up. I thought they were later in the 90s.
Well, OTS also had like I think something in 95 and then in 97. I think
because it was
Nicole
spread
Brown
out,
Simpson
right?
and Ron Goldman were murdered on this date. Well, technically on the 12th at 10:32 p.m., but on this date, 1994.
What? Friday the 13th?
No,
or just the 13th?
June 12th, 13th, 1994.
Well, you know, it is kind of interesting that the Order of the Solar Temple took so much influence from the Knights Templar, and we decided to record it on Friday the 13th. So maybe it was meant to be.
I didn't want to point that out, Julia. I didn't want to get that creepy with it. But if I may just real quick, and I don't mean to disagree because I just have to get my ancient alien cargo cult facts in order. So it was 97 when they decided to catch that flight on Halley's Comet.
Man.
97.
So that was the one back in 1997. It was probably around the same
dude,
time.
I had my purple, robe and Nikes packed. I just forgot to get that ride. You know what I mean?
So wait, so Solar Temple was 94, and then Heaven's Gate was 97.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you sure?
Positive.
All right. Well, I'll let you slide this time.
March 13th, 1997. is when they first, that was the Phoenix Light. Well, I'm just saying that there's some, other UFO stuff. So that's the Phoenix Lights, and then March 19th and 20th is when they did the final exit video, and then March 22nd through 23rd was there was phases of the suicides.
Well, we could at least say that they're happening around the same era, functioning
I think there's a
independently
connecting
of
principle.
each other.
Yeah, I think there's a connecting principle there. Yeah,
I think there's honestly, I think that many of these cults were being used in the Iran-Contra enterprise that was being conducted, like not only drug trafficking, but you had they were testing esoteric weapons at the Cabazon Indian reservation, which just blew me away. Like they were just utilizing basically the Indian reservation for this purpose, but they also were like flying in Mexican nationals to cook methamphetamines on the reservation. And it was like fascinating stuff. I couldn't even believe that this was all happening.
Well, who was the major figure in that drug operation, the Promise software reprogramming, etc. there? Michael Riconosciuto.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I know.
Who connects to all these things. He was Ted Gunderson's COINTELPRO agent in the Haight and Ashbury, looking after Charles Manson in the process. And go figure. There he is. Dana Dudar, Rotting Jules, recently discovered a playbill from a June 15th, 1967 performance, including the Grateful Dead on stage. So that's Tavistock right there. Son of Tavistock, right? And then you got Michael Riconosciuto as a technical, or as the stagehand, and you got Charles Manson as a technical advisor, technical hand on the performance, all in one performance.
In Schiri, Switzerland, where the first the 23 corpses were first found, like as far as this burnt out farm that was all basically. You had I think only 270 people even lived in this area, right? So it was like barely anyone even lived in this area. But essentially this was like Lagrange sur Salvan is how it's pronounced, I believe, south of Schiri, Switzerland. I know. Thank you. I actually looked up these pronunciations whenever I did my episode, because I tried to get it as accurate as possible without being basically a huge douchebag. You know what I mean? But anyway,
I Google translated myself as well, especially with the Luc Jarret.
Luc Jarret. Yeah, I know, right? But what struck me was this insane investigation after the police arrest warrants were issued for Luc Jarret and Joseph DeMambro after the first bodies were found, because they believed at the time, investigators instantly thought, okay, this clearly connects back to the leaders of this cult group, because they didn't discover the leaders on the site was allegedly the case, right? And so obviously sorry
to interrupt. Now is this the first incident?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
On December 23rd, correct? December 23rd, Joseph Smith's birthday. But
wow. That is interesting.
That is interesting.
Something I was screwing up before, and I was getting confused, and this is even something that happened in the first episode that we never put out. I think there's actually 3 dates: 94, 95, and 97.
Yeah.
So there's actually, I think 94 was like the big one with 48 people.
There's one. I
wanted to make sure that was the one, because I was even telling Julia 95, but it's 94, 95, and 97.
Yes, so, exactly. And I think this is, tying off loose ends. You have the Canadian operation tied to the OTS that was very much involved with another reason why I thought it was so crazy, because you had Canadian police confirming that their investigation into a money laundering operation ran by members of the cult, the OTS. There was a Radio Canada report, right, that the French service of the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, basically, they say that Jarret and DeMambro ran an elaborate arms dealing network which delivered weapons to the international black market. And the network said that millions of dollars in profits were laundered through the Royal Bank of Canada Limited and the infamous CIA front, Bank of Credit and Commerce branch offices in Ottawa, BCCI. I was just like,
yes,
holy
sir.
shit. Oh my God.
Yes, sir. And on that note, relative to all these other matters and PatCon and all this Iran-Contra stuff, there's FBI documents they're redacted, but in that PatCon operation that I went over the other night on my show on Operation GCD Live, that I would assert is the formation of BCCI and the bank being described in the Bahamas in these documents. It is redacted. However, I fill in the blanks Mad Lib style, and the only thing that makes sense is it's BCCI.
Right. Makes sense, man. But I mean,
I also think the redacted field office in there is in the Indianapolis field office, because all of this is derivative from Elvis Presley's investigation, Operation Fountain Pen.
Wow. That's insane.
Operation Fountain Pen. That sounds crazy. I agree. But Operation Fountain Pen, it's not Looney Tunes, despite it sounding Looney Tunes. Operation Fountain Pen was the largest multi-jurisdictional, longest-running FBI investigation, and it spawned the most other investigations. So the umbrella network spawned from Operation Fountain Pen is the largest in FBI history. I assert it's still going on today. I assert that's the reason why they've redacted one field office out of those PatCon documents, and that's the FBI. Well, I think it's actually two, but one of those is the Indianapolis field office, I would assert.
Right.
You mean Elvis isn't just a great guy, like we're led to believe?
So the 2 years preceding his death, he had multiple FBI agents on his tour and on his crew, and he himself was a undercover agent for the FBI. And the day after he died, the folks that they were investigating in this Operation Fountain Pen got indicted the day after he died.
Wow.
You tell me, Julia. You tell me.
Well, of course, I think he's a fucking asshole, but I did want to say something really quick.
I think he was part of the Manson family in the process, but that's a different story altogether.
He probably was.
You think I'm joking, but his personal
I don't
spiritual
think you're
guide
joking.
was JC Brings Hair Salon and drug trafficking partner. That was Elvis's sidekick and personal spiritual guide. So
JJ,
there's a lot to that tale.
I would never think you would be joking about something so serious.
I joke about a lot of things, but the things I don't joke about is that. And speaking of serious, that seems to be the undergoing trend with all these cults, right?
Yeah, this one was serious.
Theosophy and serious. They always have those two aspects.
Transit
cargo cults.
Serious. Yeah.
This is another one of those serious cults, but I wanted to just say really quickly, this first incident that you're talking about, I don't remember. I think it was 44 bodies were found or something in that range with this first one, but the way that they were found in these underground networks of like chalets, and they had like these timed explosives that went off and set all these underground chalets ablaze pretty much. But my question, and maybe you can answer this because it's something that stood out to me when I was researching it, is first off, how did they have access to these underground chalets? How did they know that they were there? Why are they under there? Why did they even have access to be under there to be pulled? It's like you would have to have a certain amount of time to get these timed explosives set up, get everybody down there, start helping people, quote unquote, kill themselves, or just killing them, or just whatever the fuck they were doing down there. It's like you need time, preparation, planning. There's so much that went into it. And it's like nobody saw these assholes going down there. Like nobody saw them leading the brigade of like 50 fucking people in these underground tunnels. Like what is going on here? That always stood out to me as weird.
In my opinion, even to control that many people, I mean, you may not need that many people, but you're gonna need a handful of people. I mean, I don't know.
Right, and
two guys with a gun each controlled all those people, possibly. But
what are you telling them?
People actually pulling the strings to have that happen too.
Exactly.
Right.
Let's think
It's
about
like,
hypnosis,
come on,
though,
everybody,
too, right?
we're going underground. Nothing suspicious here. Like what actually the fuck is going on? You know what I mean?
How did that happen?
I mean, they can definitely use guns, but let's think about hypnosis. They can also, make people a little bit more compliant. I mean, I'm not saying guns aren't used. I'm just saying you need fewer guns.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I know that there's definitely been many allegations of police protection, and the fact of the matter was that they had a task force that was involved that was instantly compromised, and we had investigators who were claiming that they were forced to essentially, at least stop pursuing all and any leads into as far as like actual military presence on the site, because that was the other claim, is that essentially that all of this was rigged to destroy evidence. And the reason being is that not all the pyrotechnic devices went off, and so this didn't entirely destroy the remaining evidence, and the bodies were supposed to be unidentifiable for the most part, and there weren't supposed to be the examples of like plastic bags over the heads of some of the victims, and gunshot wounds to the head, and things of that nature. It clearly, and then also there was oh my God, there was a in Canada, in that case, there was basically proof of potentially a military what's it called, what are they called, their fire oh shit, I can't believe that I'm forgetting the term for this, just the oh shit, flamethrower. Thank you. Damn it. I couldn't for some reason I couldn't remember. But yeah, so there's basically a military grade flamethrower that was effectively through this investigation that was conducted in Canada through relatives that basically concerned relatives had formed an investigation that was kind of attempting to make sense of this, because clearly the victims' families were questioning this theory of collective suicide, and they were not buying it, right, in any way. And so you had this court trial of one of the one of the members of the OTS, Michel Tabachnik, because he was the only one really left alive in Canada. And so they're like, we have to have someone answer for this, and so he's essentially put on trial in a criminal court. And the families of the victims filed a civil action as well, right? And so they consulted all these various experts, and essentially were going through these files, and the civil party basically identified all of these different inconsistencies in the investigation. And so it gets insane, because they start going into the essentially the organic environment surrounding the bodies of the immolated victims, which had gone which had allegedly set themselves ablaze in Canada. And it's crazy to me, because you have these two individuals who were members of one of the victims' families, named Alain Vornay, son and brother of two of the victims, who had been conducting a parallel private investigation apparently since 95, when the collective suicides took place, right? And so, at least in Vercors, right, in the Vercors region, which apparently it looks like there was an entire lack of cooperation in terms of the just refusing to investigate the possibility of murder, basically at the official level. And so this is why you had the victims' families themselves forced to make this separate litigation, as far as pursue this on their own, in a way, right? Because this is a miscarriage of justice. Obviously they don't want any real answers, because they would prefer we just accept this at face value, mass occult revolutionary suicide. They've been entirely brainwashed. They drank the Kool-Aid, right, as they say, even though we all know that was Flavor Aid in Jonestown, but that doesn't matter. So the point being that you have this expert professor who was commissioned, right, to study this crime scene. And he says phosphorus was found at the crime scene. And this indicated the use of this military grade flamethrower, which apparently in this case implied that there had been no suicide, but a staged event, obviously. And so you have, a little bit more in terms of, because this is crazy as far as the remains of these bodies, right, that were found. It turns out that at the request of the family, they carry out this. They have essentially they have like a new autopsies that are attempted to be just pursued, and so it's interesting, because what they discover is that relatives of Edith and Patrick Vornay, right, they ruled out the idea of collective suicide, and they essentially said that this land phase of the transit to Sirius was entirely ridiculous, right? And that in no way were their mother, was the mother and son actually in any way kind of like convinced that this was actually taking place. Apparently, that this was just a false narrative that was apparently being presented to the public, because basically this all, by the way, this transit to Sirius allegedly took place on the night of December 15th in 95, I believe. It was like two separate, because I think essentially you had a group who set one group ablaze and then went into a barn and tried to convince their children to set themselves on fire as well, and then killed themselves. And the children didn't kill them. It's a strange story, but it gets very interesting. But what they claim happened was that, and again, consider this is such a small area out in the forest, right, where 14 of these victims, including this mother and son, Edith and Patrick Vornay, had allegedly taken this cocktail of sedatives before they were deliberately shot several times by who they say Andre Friedli, I don't know how to pronounce it, Friedli, who's a Swiss architect, and Jean-Luc Lardenchet, who's a French policeman. So these are the two individuals who've been named throughout the course of this specific investigation that played out in the Vercors case. And so the two men were alleged to have then doused the bodies with gasoline, covered them with branches before setting them on fire, and then they committed suicide with a bullet in the mouth before falling into the blaze themselves. That was the
This is the
story.
second incident, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. This is, I was going to say, I think this was what, like a year later.
Yeah. It was,
and there was 14 of them, wasn't there?
14, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, 14 of them. They weren't the bodies like arranged first in like a weird circle, or and then they were like doused and lit, and then the two guys who were doing it, as you mentioned, then they shot themselves, and then like they
fell into the blaze.
It's just, then this was the second incident, so that ups the body count from 44 plus 14 at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, to me, how the fuck, and they say, if you research this, they say that the second incident with the 14 people who got lit on fire, and the two that shot themselves, they were trying to basically catch up with the other people to ascend to
Sirius,
whatever the fuck,
Sirius. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we're talking about a year removed from the initial incident. They're still on board with this shit, even though everybody else is fucking dead. Right. And I mean,
every one of these cults loves Sirius, Julia. They all love it.
Yeah, I get that, but it's like a year removed from the situation. You still
Sirius
are on
ain't gone
this
anywhere.
Shit. But why would you with no leader want to then still do it?
Yeah, I think it speaks to the mind control aspects of whatever's going on with this Sirius cult worship. Because again, the Mormon God lives near Sirius on the star Kolob, on the planet Kolob.
If you want my opinion, I think they were just murdered, and they said that they were they were solar cult members.
Yeah, I definitely now that
What's
by the way,
cover, right?
Very much so, and I think that it was different, as I said, with the members of the OTS, because many of them, like they were very wealthy. They were specifically recruited for reasons of kind of like compromising them within the aspect of the organization itself, have them become. It was kind of hilarious because they would just like play to their egos in so many different ways, and they all claimed that they were like, the reincarnation of Socrates and like and Joan of Arc and all these crazy ass individual historical figures,
Austin, if I may interject there, sir, when you say they recruited wealthy membership, which is obviously, if you want to have a wealthy cult, you need money from somewhere, but so that's obviously a routine move. But I mean, it is what the Manson family did as well. I mean, this is I feel when they do this, it's not just for the money. I feel like they're targeting certain families in the recruitment of some of these activities.
There were
Oh, yeah.
several millionaires that were involved in the Order
Right.
of the Solar Temple, and
Yep.
they did
Yeah.
end up dying in
There you go.
the initial sacrifice.
There
Yep.
you go. And I think that's been some framework since the Salem witch trials, right there. What Julia said, right, Nick, with the idea of targeting folks for monetarily purposes and economic purposes.
Yep.
Through these cults.
That's done. Yeah.
I know you're going to get into this, Austin, but I just wanted to say, in my opinion, the third incident. So we already talked about the first one. Now we just talked about the second one. The third one is the weirdest to me because, again, it screams these people got fucking murdered.
Oh,
and they blamed it on, oh, well, they were Solar Temple members that were trying to fucking do this fucking occult ritual shit. And it's like, there's no way you're convincing me of that. I'm sorry that it doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Agreed, 100%. And I'll get
it's
into
all the
that,
same cover narrative, right? I mean, what you're saying, right?
Oh yeah. And but I mean, what was it? The Prince of Monaco, right? Who married to Grace Kelly. He helped. He was a major aspect of as far as incorporating the organization in Monaco, which was allegedly due to the secret society fraternal organizations of powerful influence that were hubbed in as a central hub in Monaco for some strange reason. They were kind of utilizing this connection to the royal family in Monaco through Prince Rainier.
Through Onassis. Onassis arranged their marriage, and he actually was the key financier for Monaco. That's why it's so strange, because he had control, and he's part of the Black Ops, all of that. So
it's so crazy, man. That story. Right. Exactly. And I just like, it's so crazy to me, the story of Princess Grace, and Grace Kelly, because I tweeted about this a while back. Actually, I didn't even realize the fact that there was even a stranger connection to her death in terms of the Solar Temple, because obviously it's so the Sovereign Order of the Solar Temple was obviously, as we just established, officially sponsored by P2 member Prince Rainier III of Monaco, with his wife Princess Grace even becoming a member. And shortly before her death, she was apparently threatening to expose cult leader Joseph DeMambro's secret ambitions. And a few months later, during the fatal car crash, her car happened to land bizarrely in a garden owned by another temple member. Which I did think was insane.
Sheer coincidence, right?
Sheer coincidence.
Statement.
Oh, that's great.
Right. Exactly.
Just like that P2 banker, he tied himself up and hung him upside down from the Blackfriars Bridge, right?
My God. That's so ridiculous, right? God's banker. Gelly, right? Isn't that who it is? But
Licio Jelly. No, that was his associate, Licio Jelly.
Okay.
I can't remember the banker's name either, but
I know
you have a weird Licio Jelly was running that operation, the P2 operation. He was a member of he was a member of everybody, the KGB, the CIA, the Grey Wolves, he was the Freemasons, he was doing it all,
Well, and Onassis is involved, speaking of bankers, with Hitler's Reich Bank president.
Boom.
His name is actually, it sounds like Schart, like SCHACHT, like Shat. I don't know, but yeah. So that plays into all of this, and the key reason why he never lost a ship during the war. So
that's amazing.
I'm almost done with Onassis.
That's so crazy. I just think it's I really love the fact that you guys just, we all take different approaches and angles at these cases, and it's just like it's I love the fact that the meeting of the minds. It's filling in a lot of holes for me as well, just because I know that there are these connections as well, but it's like, as much as we read in terms of like the layered details here, it's so much of it is just in and out the other side until it's reinforced with another layer of oh, here he is resurfacing again. Now it's further entrenched in my mind. You know what I mean? In that sort of fashion. But I remember the story with Grace Kelly though was insane, because it was described in the Scotsman. There's an article in detail that you can find that if once you first find it, screenshot it, because they paywalled all this shit, and it's it's very frustrating. But it's super interesting because they essentially describe how, now obviously she's described as a overtly sexual person who apparently was they were having these sort of sex rituals in the OTS, where they would again provide you with this sort of, they had like you know, the same sort of situation, where as if obviously the 14 members who drank this you know, what was the term I just used? Anyway, it doesn't matter. But still, it's basically this combination of essentially, you know, psychotropic drugs and right, this sort of LSD style, but not exactly. There were multiple different drugs that were involved in the sort of sex rituals that they would conduct, and I forgot the whole list, but it is very interesting because apparently she was basically, they used acupuncture needles and placed them strategically on these sexual meridian points, and brought her to orgasm in the course of this was her initiation into the OTS, and it was described as like security lookouts lined the route as her white Jaguar sped through the narrowing, twisting roads. It's an interesting article. You guys should check it out because it gets very detailed in terms of what they actually were practicing and how they would kind of just kind of like it again. Not only were there this sort of you know, sedatives that were involved and well,
no, I think that's an important point you're making there, because one thing we don't always consider is the logistics behind obtaining these drugs.
100%. Oh my God, and that's a crazy
time after time. It's doctors that are compromised and stuff. I'm thinking right off the top of my head, the Nexium cult was doing MK Ultra experimentation, you know, literal MK Ultra experiments in Albany, New York, and in Monterrey, Mexico. And they were doing it under the auspices of an actual neurological doctor, you know, licensed and accredited through the state of New York, who lost his license as a result of these activities later. But so this much is documented, him losing his license and the activities in which he was conducting these experiments. So, you know, some, you know, taping folks' eyes open and making them watch some snuff films, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. You know, there was seven different women documented some of these films. They seem to be Mexican. And I often wonder what they were doing in Monterrey, Mexico, and if they were filming these themselves down there.
Holy shit. That's insane.
But it's oftentimes doctors compromise. So I presume there is an element to that with this cult as well.
Oh, yeah. No. Oh, my God. There's a direct element to that. And it comes in the form of this. It was, again, I believe, in the criminal trial of Michelle Tabachnik, because that basically revealed that there was a doctor who was essentially providing a pharmacist, right? This breast pharmacist, Cloud Guerin. He apparently was involved and had criminal association with the organization, and it turns out, you know, it's a homeopathic specialist, right? Friend of the late Luc Jouret. You know, it turns out Grand Master of the OTS, obviously, and had the case dismissed July 13th, apparently in 97, this individual, Cloud Guerin. And so the pharmacist, suspected of having provided the drugs, a neuroleptic, Rohypnol, and a cardiotonic, digoxin, I'm not sure how, digoxin, digoxin, okay. Ingested by the victims of the Vercors before their deaths. And so it turns out that this bailiff from Brest and Burn apparently in 1 month managed to do what obviously the authorities could not in providing this example, as far as a box of digoxin was apparently intended to be destroyed. But a lot of these medicines, several medicines and packaging was found around, like surrounding the remains and like near the remains. And it turns out that this had a less damaged box of digoxin, which bore a batch number 621. And apparently in July of 96, you had the 5th Division of the Judicial Police. They go to Procter and Gamble, and this laboratory that produced digoxin.
They produced it, Procter and Gamble.
Yes, sir.
That's interesting. I don't want to interject, but I'll get back to that in a minute. Please
okay, dude, it's fascinating. But so they produced this digoxin for the list of wholesalers who had ordered this batch, which was distributed on the 27th, 28th, and 29th of September 95, which is right before. So the investigators are using, so essentially what happened is they began to use this list, and they then pursued this and submitted a report that explained that essentially the city of Brest, this pharmacist supplied by a wholesaler who was not the recipient of batch 621 of digoxin, but 4 years later in February, Jean Vournay, right, which is one of the victims' families, he became aware of this entire investigation file, and he noticed that among the recipients of this lot 621, indicated by Procter & Gamble, was OCP repartition based in Jonestown in the suburbs of Brest, and that it had never been contacted by the police. And so on March 9th, OCP confirmed that it had been the regular supplier of the Guerin pharmacy for many years. So we have instantly, now we have a confirmation that this was the pharmacy, that was regularly supplying, this specific digoxin batch, apparently. And so on March 14th, 97, you have this bailiff who goes to the OCP and consults the archives. He discovers that Claude Guerin had apparently, the pharmacist, right, had ordered, and who's directly affiliated with Luc Jouret and the OTS, had ordered on September 29th and 30th, 95, just before the deaths, these 6 boxes of digoxin from batch 621. So to me, and especially when you see that after the Vournay family, they request, at the request of the Vournay family, obviously, the bailiff consulted all the orders placed by the Guerin pharmacy in 94, 95. His conclusion was apparently, in regard to the Rohypnol, a powerful neuroleptic, was used to drug most of the 47 OTS followers killed in Switzerland in October of 94. And while he usually orders about 10 boxes of Rohypnol per month, Claude Guerin buys 40 in June of 94, 21 in July, and 41 in August. So obviously it seems as if he's preparing for something, right? And with much larger supply. And so then you have this interesting observation that you have an examination of the pharmacist's accounts that shows that in October 94, he received a transfer of 500,000 francs. And so it looks as if he was definitely, very well, paid for or just reimbursed for these batches that obviously it seems like there was a mass murder, that these individuals were poisoned, and the connection there is just fascinating as far as the Procter & Gamble pharmaceutical batches that are being provided to the OTS directly through a connection to Luc Jouret.
I think that's a great example, and that's a direct connection through Luc Jouret. You said, huh?
Yeah, 100%.
So I don't want to take us on I don't want to go full blown Society of the Cincinnati here, but obviously these activities going on in France, and my theories of the society's activities in life generally, especially relative to ancient alien cargo cult activity, like the Mormons, which spawned from the society. So, and society membership. So this Jouret fella, he seems to be, I'm not saying he's a card carrying member, but he's got membership in his family tree. So I looked through his family tree initially, and I'll bring it right back to Procter & Gamble here real quick. I looked through his family tree and saw his forefather died in a very seminal event in the French Revolution. I was like, oh, that's not good. And then that man's grandsons were both named Napoleon, or that man's son and grandson were both named Napoleon at a time where you didn't want to be named Napoleon over there. You know what I mean?
Wow.
And Napoleon being a member of the society, I was like, well, these are all fascinating things. So then I start tracking them in America at the same time, an offshoot of that family. So I don't know if his branch is a member, but he's got an American cousin that seems to be a member through the founding the first free city in America, Washington, Pennsylvania, which originated as Fort Vance, which was founded by a member of Clan Vance, which was a member of the society there, and a cousin of George there. And the first free city was 1783 after the Treaty of Paris. this was the first city they founded. So these Jure people were there on the scene on the American wing, and I would allege that the member of that branch is indeed an employee in the Society of Cincinnati's, namesake town of Cincinnati at the headquarters of Procter & Gamble.
My God.
And Nixon's godfather there is a president of a pharmacy and a philanthropist and pharmaceutical, like, brilliant guy. So
Of course.
there might be some connects there too.
Well, that'd be
So
interesting. But if I may just
Hoffman
ruin what I just
LaRoche
said.
on that one for you to look up later.
Awesome. No, I mean, Nixon's obviously a major power player in a lot of these things, but if I may just ruminate here on that subject. So the guy you just said has the connections of Procter & Gamble over there, his American cousin, who seems to be a member of this organization that started America, has a French chapter as well. Again, I don't know if the guy Luc Jure may be a member. I don't have as much knowledge of French history, and the names look like Fraggle Rock to me, so I don't do genealogy well in France stuff. So, but again, we have a direct connection between Procter & Gamble, the Cincinnati here, the headquarters, the Jure family, right? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It seems like there's a lot more to what you've just pointed out there.
Oh,
That's all I'm getting at.
Well,
No,
the,
man,
the
they're
French
from-
connection with Martinism has to be infiltrating over here at that same point. So,
Absolutely.
I'm just creeped out. It's the same family with this. When you said Procter & Gamble, I was like, wait a second. This is not like Kill Bill sirens went off in my head. Cause again, I was like,
Right.
this is the same family with Procter & Gamble. Like, what is going on there?
Oh man, I'm telling you, I just with the fact
Wow,
that
dude.
Jure comes from the Belgian Congo, that is not at all coincidental in terms of Wackenhut's footprint at that time. They very much were involved, obviously, if you know about the paramilitary underground that was being utilized by the intelligence apparatus to basically strategy of tension, very much in the vein of Operation Gladio, and I believe, have direct ties to let's say the Black Baron Benoit de Bonvoisin and these various individuals who were aristocrats and leadership, very highest levels of Belgian leadership, and we're all tied directly into the pink ballets that were being conducted at local castles, and it was all for sexual blackmail, human compromise. But victims of the X dossier, which were all connected in with the Dutroux case. It's all fascinating because they're all connected to this paramilitary underground, just as the OTS is, and Luc Jure comes from the same exact background. I had no idea that he had so many different connections to this sort of. He was a paratrooper for a time, right? He was then he gets out of the military and then becomes this homeopathic and new age esoteric, right? Like, yeah, it's just so
the Philippines for like a year too.
100%. It's like this guy looks, he just smells like a spook. You know what I mean? In every way, and I just, to me, it feels like it's extraordinarily obvious at this point that honestly he was very much a large part of the drug trafficking and arms smuggling. I think was a huge part of it. But it's interesting to me because you have like Hydro-Quebec, the Hydro-Quebec company in Canada, and had legitimately been infiltrated by members of the OTS, and while all these terrorist attacks are being conducted, bombings, mass shootings, and the OTS was implicated in a lot of these criminal investigations. Members of the OTS were implicated, and apparently they had like ties to organized crime, which made a lot more sense as well, right? Because you think about
basically the framework of what you're describing here, also, if I may, is the framework of the P2 Lodge, like you said, with Grace Kelly's husband, who sanctioned all these activities. That was the framework of what you're describing. Is the same Gladio style framework was going on in Italy. This sounds like the French version.
Exactly, it's French Gladio, in my opinion.
Yeah,
which is weird that Onassis ran that though. Like he obviously.
I don't think it's weird. I think Onassis runs a lot of shit, Heidi.
Oh, and he was running the drugs in his ships. It's well known.
I wonder what his son, the member of the Society of Cincinnati, had to do about any of these things. JFK Jr.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
I had a question about the drugs you were talking about a second ago. So you said it was Rohypnol and did jock strap or some shit.
Right.
The
Okay,
cardiac
so-
med, digoxin. It's a cardiac med.
I like Julia's name better, the jock strap.
Okay, but
Yeah.
is this meant to like? Okay, they mixed them together, right? They mixed these two things together.
Don't do that. Don't do
I think
that.
it's sedatives, to essentially make the murders very simple, easy, straightforward. It's very much like what happened at Jonestown. I think they were essentially all drugged and sedated to the point to where they could not fight back. Then you have the Green Berets come in, and the British Black, what was it? The Black Watch, the special forces were just meandering around the area, just so happened to be running some insane operation at the time. But clearly to me, it made it to where, all right, we are in cover-up mode, right, in terms of this criminal enterprise that we're clearly have been facilitating for far too long. It's now seemingly being overexposed. And we have a window now where the public is very much involved and concerned and interested. And you have this sort of hysteria at the time, right, about the occult network happening and what's going on. Heaven's Gate, as you said, right? And this is all coming off the back of the Satanic Panic, which, right, had just essentially at least plagued the minds of many, right? For
still does, sir. Still does.
It does, brother.
Plaguing folks' minds.
Absolutely.
So you think that they used these in the first incident with the majority of the bodies? Right?
I think that this was a pattern that they basically were attempting to, anytime that they were targeting, let's say just the local chapter of the OTS that needed to be, essentially, it was basically, I forget how Bo Gritz put it in terms of Jonestown, but it was interesting because it was basically like, all right.
Bo Gritz. I laugh every time I hear that name now, because why would anyone ever take anything he did seriously about anything, right?
Man, for real.
I love Grits, man. I take Grits very seriously.
Grits.
Bo Gritz? How do you like your Bo Gritz?
I like my Bo Grits with butter and a little salt and pepper.
There you go.
But anyways, so the first incident, right? Remember, because I said it didn't make any sense to me how they were able to get all those people down there. So do you think that they were drugged before or after they got into the fucking chalets? Like,
I think I don't believe that most of them were lured there. Well, I think they were lured there, definitely, but I don't think that they were like. I think that mainly they were obviously very consistent within the terms of practicing these rituals. So they would always kind of gather and meet for these rituals, and they would always gather and meet in the covert spaces that they had built within the chalets, which were like, behind these false walls and shit. And which the investigators, at least the initial investigators who arrived on the scene at first, didn't even find any bodies, right? They're like, what the hell's going on? Like where is this crime,
right.
And then they finally discovered the false panel and went into the area where which I found that to be very interesting as far as the way that some of the bodies were discovered. But there was one individual who I believe he provided an interesting example of let's say someone who had fallen out of line with the way that things were going, because clearly there had been, some real problems in terms of leading up to the mass deaths that occurred, right? The internal group dynamics were kind of like, at least leading up to the tragedies, things were snowballing, right? There was an escalation. And I think what had happened is that Joseph DeMembro, Luc Jouret was under investigation for arms smuggling. All right. And so you already have this is, right? Now we have a legitimate concern that this is going to come out and we'll see the light of day in terms of the covert operation being conducted, utilizing the occult organization as a plausible cutout. Now, that doesn't mean none of the individuals involved with the OTS. I think that very many of them practice this belief system legitimately. We're attempting to transit to the star Sirius, right? It's a hilarious, I think
those folks are trying to get on Haley's comment, you know what I mean, with the Heaven's Gate, right?
Right.
They were serious about it.
I will say it's crazy because the rudimentary ideas of like, as far as just like what they were teaching, the blue star appeared some 26,000 years ago. The star Sirius, home of a number of ascended masters,
there you go,
known as the Great White Brotherhood.
Theosophy right there. Yep.
Who came
I
to
think
Earth.
part of the hypnosis campaign of these activities is to convince folks, is to embed these ideas in their folks' subconscious.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I mean, it's like they're talking about this Great White Brotherhood coming to Earth, inhabiting a subterranean spiritual realm known as Agartha. And right, and these masters
sounds like.
Ooh.
I know this happened to me the other night when I did whatever this is with Sam. It was
what you're describing there was the gun trade, the drug trade, all these things. This is the same formula, the same format we see time after time with the same ancient alien cargo cult foundation.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah. I think that it's very strange because like when you see that what these masters were
that's our logo right there.
To be, oh man, yeah. That there's another one too. There's a couple different renditions, but they're all very, very similar.
Okay, this one I thought was very
like something else I've seen before. I'm sure, Nick, too.
My God, but it is crazy because apparently what they were claiming, these masters were basically souls. And you could occasionally manifest, as far as these ascended masters could basically, they would occasionally manifest themselves in corporeal form, right? And
right.
Yeah, and so that was where
like Saint Germain, right? That's the big one, right? They're like, he keeps coming back because that's their belief system, right? Theosophy.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's super crazy because it basically, this is where they would have the special effects come into play with these underground chambers that the temple members would gather, and privileged members could be granted. Basically,
I can respect the performative nature of that, at least, right? I mean, at least they put some effort into it. They weren't half-assing it. They took it serious.
Especially if you're on sedatives and psychedelics or something at the same time, and you're sort of like in and out of consciousness.
People pay good money for that. Also, people pay good money for that.
That's what's confusing me. It's like, if you've already given them Rohypnol, why do you then need to give them the doc strap to just like explode their heart or what?
Yes, the Rohypnol will slow your heart rate. It's very similar to Xanax, and then the cardiac indication for the digoxin has a really small therapeutic window. So if you give that in too much of a dose, which it could have been given IV or in liquid form, pill form, whatever, after they were already woozy from the Rohypnol, then it just makes your heart stop. You just go to bed forever.
Why is this the drink that they were drinking? Because it's like, why do you then need to poison them and then burn them on top of that?
The burning, I don't know. Yeah, but the poisoning, I mean, maybe they were used to it. Maybe they were like ready for their party because they're used to seeing these ascended masters with drugs. Thinking. Yeah.
So is the burning ritualistic in nature? Is that what we're talking about? The drugs is incapacity.
The burning is ritualistic. The alleged story here is that the burning was in direct as far as it was directly symbolizing the 54 martyred Templars from the 1300
from Friday the 13th.
Yeah, that's legitimately what they claim.
That's crazy.
And by the way, the bullet wound,
which again, if I may, Austin, speaks to this society that when I saw that theology, and again I looked at the guy's history, that's when I started going deep into the Jaray situation with the Society of Cincinnati, because the Society of Cincinnati literally is the modern day Knights Templar. They are the descendants of the Templar, and they are a modern day knighthood.
I'm going to have to do an episode on that organization because I did one on the Pilgrim Society and the Anglo-American establishment, and I couldn't believe
if I may, a hereditary member of the Society of the Cincinnati, a U.S. senator from Mississippi, I believe, founded the Pilgrim Society. So there you go.
God, dude. Oh my God. It's just so crazy. This is never ending, but everything tends to overlap at this level of research. It's so interesting as far as
for sure.
especially.
But I think that's why we see the Templar stuff here. You see what I'm saying? Like this is a generational. This is getting passed down to folks like Jure here, right?
Who's got the share screen?
That's me.
On.
We done staring at this logo.
No, I was just gonna say.
You want to stare at it? Let's look at it some more.
No, JJ, I was gonna say if you can, pull it up. You can see the videos on YouTube of their rituals. They're available on YouTube.
It's crazy footage too, right?
Yeah,
I
don't know if you
videos
can.
Stuff. I have videos. I just don't know what they are, but I have ripped videos from even when I covered this the first time.
I think it's important for people if you could pull it up to see, because it's so ritualistic in nature. The colors, the garb, they stepping up to this altar and I can't believe it's on YouTube. Actually, it's kind of freaky.
Yeah,
I did not know any of these things were on YouTube, but I'd be interested to see the comparisons to some of these other Knights Templar or Catholic, influences on these rituals.
Well, it looks like a hybrid mix of both of those things.
That's what I'm saying.
Watch the videos. They've got capes and hoods and gloves.
Martinists do the same thing.
Oh yeah.
Well, if you recall, the Martinists, the society, the French chapter of the society, the Grand Orient Lodge, and the Martinists all have an epicenter there with his name's escaped me. I think he was the heir to the. I think he was the heir to the Swedish throne, if I remember correctly. The guy I'm thinking of, at least. I'll have to get back to you. I think I sent you a note on it last week, but I've already forgotten what it was too. So no worries.
Well, and not that the Martinists of nowadays are like this. I just want to clarify. I don't know what they do. I mean, I know their theology, but and everything gets perverted. So, but they are a Solomonic practicing sect.
There you go.
And so that's important because they actually practice magic. And one of the days that they practice and call down these spirits is the spring equinox, which is right close to when the second event happens. So I find that, really interesting.
Right when the Heaven's Gate folks caught that trip to Halley's Comet on the spring equinox.
Exactly. Yep.
My God. That is just like Jure, by the way, like both Demembro and Jure claimed to be reincarnations, right? Like of these insane, like Jure himself said he was Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, and right, and
there you go.
Yeah, and the founder of it, the founder himself, which is just crazy. But and then Demembro, he claimed past incarnations, like that they could basically, they were reincarnations of multiple entities, including one of the Egyptian pharaohs, and one of Jesus's 12 disciples was another one that he legitimately claimed.
Barnabas.
And, he said that he was also somehow at the very same time the Roman soldier who pierced Jesus's side at the crucifixion.
Nice. And, well, he's got skills. He's a very prolific man, this guy.
Yeah, no shit. And it also obviously Demembro himself claimed to be one of the ascended masters. Monotonous, I think, is the name of that ascended master. But it's very strange that clearly you had like this as I mentioned, you had like a pay to play system where like these wealthier individuals within the cult would pay for to become privileged members, and you would get specifically kind of like rituals tailored toward you, in various ways, but also you would be given this opportunity to witness these epiphanies from the ascended masters, and the visions, right, that apparently would be provided to the initiates or the initiated members, right? And apparently this is when the expert in the production of holographic images, Antonio Dutoit, came into this story, because he was providing the obviously behind the curtain, and apparently I believe it was Demembro's son. Demembro's son later blew the whistle on this, right, as he leaves the cult, and I believe also the alleged solar god king, the child Emmanuel, right? It's very interesting because it turns out that basically as she continues to age, she essentially just ages out of the cult in a way, and it's like, this is absolutely ridiculous. Like, I am not a part of this, right? And as she leaves, she kind of like collaborates with her brother, and essentially kind of blows the whistle on the inner workings of this sort of elaborate scheme of providing these holographic images that are supposed to obviously be this ascended master that's sort of providing you with a potential vision, which I think was also a part of the psychedelics that that were being provided. So I don't know, you consider all of that with sort of like the decorporealizing right of the transit to the star Sirius. Like, it's strange because this is where you're supposed to join the ascended masters, and you're now basically transcended as into an immortal and an awakened soul, right? And yeah, it's very interesting, but it seems to be like the star Sirius is a massive part of this dawning age of Aquarius in some strange way. And it's
so do you think it's like part belief system, part of this hypnotic program that they're programming folks with this?
Because the
like, I kind of viewed as both, right?
Exactly, because the anti-cult network was heavily involved in this exact moment, and essentially the European anti-cult network was basically, they firmly established themselves off of the back of especially the OTS, which I found very interesting, and basically started issuing these kind of proclamations against these new age esoteric organizations and things of that nature, which I found interesting because all of the anti-cult network seems to directly tie into a lot of MK Ultra operatives who tend to be like Rabbi Maurice Davis being one of them, obviously Dr. Jolly on West, clearly Dr. Jolly's one of them, but still, it's like we have the dark sorcerer of MK Ultra himself, right? Who's Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, who's kind of employing a lot of these MK Ultra operatives, who are now becoming key prominent, individuals and advocates of the anti-cult network, who are then going into all these scandals and cases and infiltrating and sort of just sewing themselves into the criminal trials and various things of that nature, with the False Memory Syndrome Foundation and the board of advisors, scientific board of advisors that are on that. As far as
I think you're pointing out some great things here, because once these things fail and they get rolled up, then they have to come up with a new program. So the anti-cult network you were just describing, Scientology sues the largest organization there, the one that's really orchestrating all that stuff, the Cult Awareness Network. They sue them out of existence circa 1994, right around the same time. And then they get all of their assets. So then the scary thought is, real quick, when you start calling the Cult Awareness Network to get out of a cult, you start talking to Scientology, and no one knew about it for years.
Man, there's so many different parallels in my mind as well to Scientology in many ways, to the OTS doctrine as well, and the way they kind of function. It's just like, that is what struck me. Clearly, they were much more of a secret society than even a cult group in my mind. Like, it's kind of how they functioned, and they were sort of just like, what is it? The Neo-Templar Renaissance is essentially what they claimed that Joseph de Membro was basically, responsible for. And
it's always a Joseph.
Right. That's too funny. But yeah, I'm fascinated by all of this, because this kid Emmanuel, right, who's considered the cosmic child and an avatar, right, and it does, like, their aim was sex magic, just obviously
it always is.
It's crazy, but
do you find it like interesting too? You mentioned about the marriages, like the month before JFK died, Jackie goes on Onassis's yacht, pissed off because her baby passed away and he didn't want to come and deal with it. And so then all of a sudden, this is real.
What?
Yeah, twice he did this to her. Twice.
Oh my God.
So her sister was dating Onassis, and she talks her into getting on this yacht, which he then tells her, you better get off that yacht if you have to swim. And so I'm curious, like, if they did this drugging to her and made her believe A, that her husband's gonna die, which hello, and B, that, you know, she actually was truly in love with Onassis, because he mentioned on the yacht to his help, which is documented, that will be my next wife.
That is crazy. I did not know that.
Gave her a nice diamond bracelet on her exit out, and her sister that was the girlfriend got like some little trinket.
Wow.
Someone put in the comments that Emmanuel means God with us in biblical terms.
God is with us. Okay.
God is with us. I honestly, I thought based on like what Ancient Aliens said, that the little girl Emmanuel was possessed by an alien or something like that. And that, of course, they went with that direction. But it sounds like before we started recording that you've read Program to Kill. I know JJ has too. And I think people have a hard time thinking that secret societies or occult ritualism or government programs are independent of each other, and that they somehow can't be connected, because people just like to put things in boxes like, oh, this is a ritual, or oh, this is a secret society. It can't be tied to the government in some way. And it's like, that's the biggest mistake you can make, is making those two things separate and independent of each other, because most of the time they run in tandem, or they're directly involved with each other. So to me, when I saw this story about the solar temple, it was like, what 3-letter agency is connected with forming this group? Much like the Manson family and more notable cults throughout time, they're always related to something.
I would argue that 3-letter agency may in fact be the SOC, the Society of Cincinnati.
All right, then. So there you go.
It makes sense to me, but I mean,
you're spot on there, Julia, for sure.
Oh yeah, everything that you just said, I entirely agree with. Absolutely, it's something that I just, at a certain point when it's just, I do not believe in coincidence any longer, right? Like, it's just been driven out of me. There's no way in hell at this point, at this level of research, right? Where it becomes undeniable, where you have like these crazy ass political mafia Gladio ties to Jure and DeMambro, where you had like basically there was even a psychiatrist who made supported this claim that the affair had a political mafia tie, citing possible links between Jure and members of Gladio, which clearly that comes in the form of Julian Origas in many ways, which is a very interesting story that specifically ties in the Gladio operation. But what's interesting here is just that you have basically this trail which that seems to implicate that DeMambro was linked to Jean-Louis Farge, a Toulon crime boss who was murdered in '93, apparently. And so there was the OTS was basically implicated in these French political scandals. And there were all these connections with French politicians like Charles Pascal and this assassination of Jan Piaget, I believe. And so it's interesting because it seems like there's clearly, if you look at the Alex Constantine archive, like he's a great resource, by the way. Every time I stumble upon some connection that he's provided, like at least a resource as far as investigative accountant, he tends to take a direction that appeals directly to the way that I kind of view the world in general. But as far as just the international covert intelligence apparatus that seems to be very well entrenched, but he basically
he did a great job on Iran Contra and OJ Simpson stuff too there.
Oh hell yeah. Yep. Yeah, it gets nuts because, they basically were claiming that through destroying the chalets, where the deaths had all taken place, basically, the evidence had been burned, and obviously that was a key component of what they were hoping to attempt to cover up was clearly they. But so found dead in the Vercors, though, was apparently an agent of the intelligence service that was close to Pascal, and so there was a presentation of these sources of that apparently an agent of the Central Directorate of the Border Police was a mole who had infiltrated the order, and that so this is it's very interesting because apparently you have a combination here of international arms smuggling, right? The presence of BCCI, obviously, which is just completely a CIA cutout, and then you have these Canadian journalists that were followers of the Mambro and Joret, who were also killed allegedly to bury public disclosures of this gun running and money laundering at the same time. So it seems like very much like Jonestown, where they're just kind of like, okay, Operation Greenlight the cover up here, basically, right? And essentially, we have to cover our tracks here, and if we never let a good crisis go to waste, then obviously we're going to take victims of the Montreal experiments, maybe even undocumented children of some kind that you've been conducting experiments on, and then who knows why Dr. Leslie Mutu just can't count because the Guyanese are retarded. But in reality, right, it's the fact that they're just adding bodies to the pile because they're trying to tie off all these loose ends for these covert operations that are being conducted all over the world. That's what Bo Gritz said happened at Jonestown. He said, I wouldn't be surprised at all. This is what Green Berets told me, who flew in on the site, were told to fire on site from the helicopter. You had Green Berets. Specifically, there was one individual Green Beret who claimed that he was flown into the remote location in the jungles of Guyana there to the People's Agricultural Project, and he basically was told that all the Green Berets were told to fire on site, and so he said as they flew in the helicopter, he witnesses survivors running up as the helicopter's landing, calling for help, and they fired upon them before the helicopter even landed. That was the alleged story that was told to Bo Gritz. And Bo Gritz, he said that he was told that exactly what I just said happened, that they potentially had taken MK Ultra victims from Dr. Ewan Cameron's Montreal experiments in Canada and just dropped the bodies in the People's Temple as far as just kind of like link them directly to, that's why all the body bags were already prepared and ready, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff were it's just like, man, all of this was and the site itself had been secured by the CIA and Angolan for training up Angolan rebels and shit prior to this, and Operation, was it Project Shalom or Operation Shalom, which ties in Colston Westbrook, who's a Project Phoenix operative. And this guy is the guy who set up the pipeline who comes back. He gets a call, right? All right, man, we're good with your Project Phoenix covert operations. Come back here with those skills that you've acquired, and let's place you at UC Berkeley as a fake professor to set up a pipeline to an institution in California that happens to house. Well, first of all, it was outed by Congressman Leo Ryan as being a key facility for MK Ultra experiments. At the time, they were basically utilizing the California prison complex, and they had prison guards who were on the payroll, and they were running these MK Ultra experiments and then releasing prisoners and claiming they escaped. And they would all of a sudden they would turn up in Dallas all the way across the country committing a mass shooting and get a very light sentence and then be brought back to that specific institution, right? And but still it's insane that Colston Westbrook set up that pipeline that Patty Hearst wound up in visiting Donald Cinque de Vries before she was ever kidnapped, right? At that specific facility where MK Ultra experiments were being conducted. It's just
don't forget the Manson girls who were in that situation as well, right?
And so you look at the
Martha
SLA,
Mitchell.
right? What was it? The Hydra, the Cobra, of the SLA, the symbol of the Symbionese Liberation Army. Yeah, and it's just like, first
you're
of all,
describing all these innate plans and details and stuff, right? When you're doing a great job at it also. But I think the one thing to consider was you're describing how quickly these folks operate is when they go into these operations, they have contingency plans, they have plans to roll things up, and they have plans to move forward. So in the event these things do happen, these things are already in place.
Yeah.
They just got to hit the switch, right? So, I think that's one thing I've seen over the years is folks try to, they have you're not having, you're just explaining it great. I'm just trying to, hammer home the point you're making there is these things are well developed, well established. And when shit does hit the fan, they have a number of different contingency plans in which to deal with these things. So, which is how you're describing how quickly these things roll up and operate continuously.
Oh, yeah.
So you're saying like this is the French Jonestown, pretty much.
It feels like it, but of course,
I don't think it's any different, right? Yeah, I mean,
yeah, the geographical designation of the group itself was obviously primarily France, Switzerland, and then French Quebec, Canada, right? And like that
where
to
was
me,
Jonestown, French Guyana, right?
Yeah, it's yeah, and right on the border, by the way. Right, and which is very interesting because of the covert operations that they would launch from that area. Clearly it was a black site, man.
Especially when you're dealing with a Belgian mercenary, right? You're dealing with this French Belgian mercenary fellow, right?
Exactly, and that's what
part
was
of a network,
said.
right? Like an Operation 40 or a Phoenix program kind of network, or maybe he's even part of the Military Assistance Command, right? Of Bill Colby, right? Because Bill Colby's involved in all the business relative to P2 as well, right?
Exactly, and you consider
he set up Gladio. Shit, what am I talking about? Bill Colby set up Gladio.
100%, and during
his son testified against Orenthal J. Simpson. Just saying.
During Operation Condor, I just realized that they're just naming this based on the geographical representation of this bird, right? Phoenix. Condor, you have these various manifestations of it's the same project, right? And what I realized that was happening with Condor is that they had this joint intelligence operation that they were all conducting. I forget the location where they all had the meeting to effectively, just they established the agenda in a very, strategic and they had a hierarchy of priorities that they were implementing here, and I believe that's obviously why you have Colonia Dignidad you being utilized in the remote jungles of Chile, right? And they're just like, what are they doing there? That's by the way, that's how I discovered the OTS was through the Colonia Dignidad story, which I was introduced to from Jonestown. And that's what had happened is that Adam from Deborah Gets Red Pilled, which I miss him. I always, I wish they were still doing stuff, man, because I love Adam. He was always good to me. He's
a cool dude.
Yeah.
He's so really relaxed. The way he presents stuff is like, all right, I feel like I'm just talking to like one of my friends about
exactly.
You know what I mean?
Man, he was our very first producer for Already Dead when Jose and I started, because I had gotten to know Adam just from he invited me on when they were still doing it. I think I was actually the very last episode they ever did, which I was like, man, that makes me sad, but at the same time they said as much while they introduced me and stuff. But I think he's just living that life, as far as his core principles, he's actually exercising them as a homesteader. Like, it's beautiful to see. I think he got his purple belt in jiu-jitsu by the time he was about to leave the show, and he's like, man, I got to leave because my jiu-jitsu class. And I think he just was kind of, opting out at that point. And I get it at a certain level. But anyway,
I don't blame him, man. I live in a van down by the river. So sometimes you just got to do these things in life.
Exactly, buddy. Yeah, I very much admire it. But anyway, to say the least, he's the one who introduced me to Colonia Dignidad, because he had brought me on. We just were talking about all different things that we've covered, and Jonestown, of course, came up, and And then I was introduced to Colonia Dignidad. I had no idea that existed. And you know, Paul Schaefer, the pedophile SS officer who fled and with all these children, you know, and then he resurfaces in Chile, and he creates this Nazi safe haven in the Chilean jungle, and that, by the way, still exists to this day. I forget the name of it now, but it's been renamed. But it basically was a Nazi enclave in Chile during the Pinochet, and right during these massive.
It was the CIA takeover. Pinochet was operating out of there, right?
Exactly. So they were sending political prisoners to Colonia Dignidad to get tortured and shit. And they had underground bunkers. They had a whole weapons arsenal that they were manufacturing weapons. They had an airstrip where apparently, what's his name? Joseph Mengele stayed in Colonia Dignidad for a time. They said he would come and visit, and that this was a way for them to essentially, skirt any sort of and circumvent any sort of real customs or anything of that nature, right? This is a clandestine operation, so we need covert flights. And
I learned about it through a spook, so isn't that weird?
Oh my God,
Peter Levenda's book was the first place I learned about that.
That's hilarious.
And bringing up Bariloche and right? Who all went and visited Bariloche, each president except a few. So
man. And you know, there was a file they found in Paul Schaefer's archives that was a JFK file and had bullets that matched the gun allegedly. And it's just so crazy that and by the way, there's a connection there to the Letelier assassination, I believe, in DC, who's a diplomat that was just killed in a car bomb. And that was apparently devised.
I know that bombing. I took Nick by that site on our DC tour. When I took Nick on a DC tour, I took him.
Get out of here.
That's right by the Society Cincinnati headquarters, dude. It's literally right there.
It's connected to the Solar Temple.
The bombing, that bombing. That also
it's connected to the Colonia Dignidad, right? Which was the Nazi enclave in Chile. I know. I'm sorry, I jumped around.
Do you recall when Peter Levenda went down there and invaded that place and created an international incident?
Invaded.
He definitely invaded that place, right? So he was like, I was just a young dude who was just going places and looking at things. He worked for this software company at the time that was also employed his buddy John Podesta. Isn't it weird they're both Thelemites decades later and doing all this alien stuff together when they started out together doing that?
My God,
I did want to ask Austin something just really quick. I don't know how much time we're going to go on for, but I just wanted to ask Austin about the third incident really quick before we wrap, like the Solar Temple, because in my opinion, it's the weirdest one out of all three. I think it's the weirdest one.
Right. Yeah, I think that, you know, it's definitely super interesting as far as each individual mass death that occurred. It was definitely, you know, just to me, each and every one of them seemed to provide another window into the real actual motivation, you know, that was playing out here, which I believe was just that. Again, I think that this organization itself was entirely just kind of overexposed. And I think the criminal investigations that were being conducted into Jure and DeMembro himself for effectively, you know, he had you had members of the cult who were leaving, and they were apparently filing lawsuits against DeMembro for apparently, you know, gaining control of major portions of their private property and things of that nature, as in sort of this way of convincing them, you know, to hand over their assets in a strange way. But yeah, it's definitely I'll get into this third incident because, like, what you have to realize too is that like the way these bodies were found in the original in Chery, Switzerland, right? It's crazy because this is a room that had been converted, right? Hey, Sophie, stop. It's my dog. I'm sorry. Into this conference center, right? That was chill out. Anyway, that was basically converted into like this secret ritual chamber in a way. But they found all these handbags, suitcases, clothes, Swiss, French, and Canadian passports. So obviously for the organization, I think again it kind of like plays out that they were obviously facilitating a lot of these weapon sales and things of that nature, and that definitely seems to have provided many of these the financial assets of the organization itself and how they were kind of utilizing the enterprise. But there were all these traces of blood on the floor and the false door, right? That basically is what led them to, as far as the traces of blood led them to the false door in the wall, right, to the other room. This is what I thought was worth noting. It's draped with crimson satin wall coverings, as you mentioned before, right? As far as just the way the actual room looked. And it was adorned with this Messiah-like painting of Luc Jouret. And this is where they had found the 18 bodies that were arranged in a sun-like circle, right? And and their heads were pointing outwards. Inside the circle was a golden chalice on an altar. And you had these very tall mirrors that filled the room. And so you had a small temple, a smaller temple where like 3 bodies or more were lying as well. And this 23rd corpse was found in a separate room at the foot of a table. But some of the bodies had plastic bags over their heads, and some were even handcuffed behind their backs. 20 had traces of bullet wounds. And investigators even said that some cultists had been injected with powerful drugs before their deaths. So that at least corroborates what I had mentioned earlier about the pharmaceutical, batches that had just recently been provided leading up to this, which seemed to be far more, the number of the batches themselves, right? That as far as how much they were actually receiving, seemed to implicate that they had something planned for, this sort of mass transit exodus in a way. So at the very least, you have membership, at least members of the leadership that were very much, read in on this. But then you have 100 miles south of Cherie, right? After, by the way, you have all these, white, black, red, and golden ceremonial robes that were discovered, and some of the bodies at the farm, right? And police discovered a sword, right? 3 rifles, a box of ammunition, empty champagne bottles littered the scene, and a freezer was filled with vegetables grown by sect members. And it was interesting because the bullet wounds on the bodies, they didn't correspond with any of the weapons found at the farm, which obviously suggests that someone performed executions and then fled the scene, which was another thing that investigators were pointing out that was something worth, being aware of, obviously, because that definitely does imply that clearly these individuals were under the, impression that they were just, I think, performing a ritual, having a party, and then effectively were mass murdered. And 100 miles south of Cherie, Switzerland, right? You have fires break out.
I think that's a great point you make there, if I may, real quick, Austin. That's a great point you make where I think some of these folks, they think they're doing a ritual and then, I think it goes wrong for them. Just like when they say, like, with all these false flags that they're doing an exercise and then suddenly it goes live, you know what I mean? It's kind of the same kind of concept, I think, within this ritual sacrifice. I don't think all these people are signing up for ritual sacrifices. You know what I mean?
Right. No.
They're being duped. Yeah. They're being duped is what I'm getting. And they're being told it's some sort of ritual they're participating in. Then, oh, whoops, a daisy. We
Right. No, definitely, man.
That brings up a good question. A question that I had earlier, kind of with the first one. I'm not not trying to like take away from this third one.
Mm-hmm.
But
Saint Casimir, by the way, I promise you, I'll talk about it, Julia. Sorry, Nick, go ahead.
Just even like looking at how I think blackmail and rich people, could there really have been no outcome from the sex magic except for blackmail?
Yeah, that is like.
Yeah, I think that's part of it, right? It's the whole. I call it the whole hog effect. If I may, they're all saying it's called the whole. So I just don't want folks to get. That's a great point because folks get concentrated. Well, they were doing this one thing. They're doing all of the things, right? They're doing all of the things.
They think you're gonna have sex to make this work. They'll do it.
They did. They said that. He said that they had to charge it. Yeah, whatever. So.
For sure.
I think that's a great. Yeah, that's definitely part of it.
Yeah, now go back.
I just when you get into the third event in 97, right? I think it was March of 97 is when it actually occurred. But yeah, this is where you have, they burned down the house with them inside, which clearly is another example of just entirely destroying evidence. I think was a major component of what they were attempting to achieve here. And it goes without saying, honestly, as far as the incendiary devices that were all strategically placed, and as the investigators found, who were honest in the beginning of the original. Just kind of responding to the scene, they 100% discovered undetonated, incendiary devices that were intended to entirely destroy the rest of the evidence, and that would have, I think, effectively covered up a lot of the questions that that the public had following the event, and so, but yeah, there were.
May I ask a question? And I do apologize, Julia, because I think you were correct earlier. What was the date on this, sir? That March 22nd,
1997 was.
So this was the same date as the Heaven's Gate.
My God.
That's what I thought. There was something with the solar temple and the Heaven's Gate being on the same fucking
you are correct, man. I was conflated earlier with 1994 and stuff. Maybe I got lost in an ornithology Simpson wormhole there.
You're good, because it was September 94 when the Morin Heights Cherie and Salvant fires broke out so
we're talking the end of these activities, and that is the precise same date as Heaven's Gate. So these folks they caught a ride on Halley's Comet.
Well, that's why I said there's no way.
Maybe we're the ones who are wrong, Julia. Maybe they're all having a good time right now on Halley's Comet.
They've become ascended.
Yeah, maybe.
They've become
ascended up my ass.
Oh my God.
I mean, there's no coincidence though that those two things happened, and they had such similar.
For sure.
But anyways, go ahead.
Can I make one point on all that similarities and all these other things? And I don't want to cut you off there, Austin, but I do want to. Whenever you're done, I would like to bring it all back. My comments on the society and Operation Pac-On and how it connects to all this stuff. I would like to bring, because it doesn't sound like it should, right? With all the French stuff, right? But it literally does. It literally does,
dude. I'm very interested now, because as much as I'm aware of PatCon just essentially being the right wing version of COINTELPRO, it's obviously and also I think it's very interesting that the timing of it all, right? The total information awareness objectives that were playing out, the continuity of government that's leading into the Patriot Act. I forget the precursor to the Patriot Act that passed just after the OKC bombing. But that was all PatCon that staged the precedent-setting operations that clearly led to that dystopian framework being implemented and called for. Right, problem, reaction, solution is the name of the game. And just too often, right? I consistently.
So we're describing elements of the same beast here. When I say these are connected. So, did you have any more on the third incident? Because I didn't want to cut you. Yeah, because I want to hear more about it. I just didn't want to cut you off, because Julie was definitely correct there. That this is literally the same days as the Heaven's Gate situations popping off in San Diego.
That's fascinating.
At a home connected to the 9/11 folks, the 9/11 terrorists.
Jesus, bad. You know what's hilarious? They
rented it later. They were like, I got to get in on some of this alien action here. Before I do these bombs, I got to do this alien action.
I have a note card that I pulled up. All right, you can't read it, but it says OTS notes, and it's just a little bit. It's like 4 notes that I had written down.
Dude, that's a lot of words there. Though. That's some good notes.
It's just one little note. Dude, if you looked at my space, I look like a psychopath.
I got 0 notes, bud. You're beating me. So,
well, I will say that I just have to, because I just too many details running around in my mind that I'm too schizo-brained, where I just obviously we call the homies on Already Dead, right? The audience, Schizo Bros. We're basically the Schizo Bros. But so that is very accurate, I will say. As far as the way my mind works, I can't help myself. It has to. I think the Charlie meme, the Pepe Sylvia, what I mean?
With the yarns and stuff. Pepe
Exactly.
Sylvia.
Exactly, from It's Always Sunny. And that is effectively, I think, how your mind has to function in a way in order to kind of even breach these subjects and in an objective way, to where you're at least pursuing some legitimate, let's say, just at the very least, I'm always attempting, as I said in the beginning of this, to reinforce and corroborate as much evidence as possible, because I don't want to sit here and make allegations if they're too far reaching. Although I will say there are moments where I'm purely being speculative. I try and always be honest about that. But in terms of you effectively have to speculate at times, because you have to ask these questions, right? Like, why on earth, is Joseph DeMambro, traveling across international borders with major amounts of financial capital, which seems to be some facet of money laundering happening, which clearly was occurring. And like, if you're not,
so is he repping some Vatican bank interest? If I may just ask, what do you think there? Vatican bank interest with this guy, or is he doing mafia stuff? What's he doing?
I think the fact that he is tied so directly into, and I do think that you have, again, the unholy alliance playing out.
There you go.
Gladio, like you really do have that playing out here, and so I think that
because he's representing someone's interest, right? You got the other fellow is doing, like I said, he's got a lot of Society Cincinnati stuff going on around him. So, and then you got this guy representing some other interests, like the mob or the Vatican, right? Or something in between, perhaps.
And what is P2? I mean, what is Le Cercle? Like they're directly affiliated with the Vatican, and I think that the Vatican Bank finances a shitload of these organizations, and that's where they wash a lot of the money too, right? And I didn't realize that with what's her name? Oh shit.
Catherine Austin Fitz?
No. Oh my God.
She's a big world banker, talks about all this money laundering, washing and stuff.
Right. But Mother Teresa, right?
Oh, so she talking about banking stuff. What's she do?
She's directly affiliated with child sex trafficking and laundering the profits through the Vatican Bank, which I didn't realize. She did money
stuff, huh?
Yeah, Mother Teresa directly affiliated with George Bush Sr. and even had an orphanage connection to Hillary Clinton, and I didn't realize this, but that makes a lot more sense considering the Laura Silsby stuff and obviously just the Haitian children scandal and what it's even worse than that. I mean, I found out recently.
Those are the Haitian children that Hillary Clinton allegedly eats.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Frazzle drip.
The ugliness of her inside definitely matches the ugliness of her outside. Mother Teresa looks like a fucking scraggly ass cigarette butt. And there is no way you look like that. But think about it. It's like there's all of the crimes that she's committed against children. It's all over her fucking face. Look at her.
Yeah, man.
Look at her. She looks like a demon.
Yeah,
she looks like a demon hag in a fucking nun's outfit.
Yeah,
100%. But and consider what she represents, right? Now that is a perfect example of the inverted moral landscape, right? Like this.
No shit.
What in the hell? This is supposed to be the bright and shining beacon of right, and just like
not mine.
No,
she looks like a fucking wrinkled asshole. And I can't believe it's like the more you look into her, it's like, of course, Mother Teresa, fuck you. I cannot believe it's becoming a conspiracy theorist. You have to understand you cannot have any idols. Nobody, not music, not movies, not politically, nothing. Every single person that you think, oh, well, maybe they're a good guy. Oh, maybe they're all right. No, they're not. They probably eat and fuck kids, or they fucking do some kind of literally, I'm sorry. I just, after reading Program to Kill and looking into Dave McGowan's work, it's like,
Laurel
Canyon.
You
have nothing. Laurel
You're
Canyon,
not wrong.
exactly.
You're not wrong, Julie. That's for damn sure. It's a dark world.
Culture creation, man. I mean, the Esalen Institute, right? Just like Tavistock gone west. I mean, that's really what happened in a way, right? And it's just like all these celebrity personalities are clearly manufactured, and many of them are entirely manufactured out of whole cloth, and then kind of like given this you know, disingenuous rise, right, to this level of prominence that is so clearly as far as just like they were put on the path by the permanent establishment, and are given these very, it's just you're given that privileged position of you get all these opportunities come your way, right? Because it's entirely a corrupt, obviously deliberately a corrupt system, that's intentionally creating these influencing operations, as far as that's what they become, right? They become these sort of,
there is a Laurel Canyon of podcasting too. I know people like to skirt around that, but there is a Laurel Canyon.
Oh boy.
I'd like to talk about PatCon, Ancient Alien Cargo Cults, and the Society of Cincinnati, if I may, real quick.
Definitely, but what do you think of Sean Ryan? What do you think of it?
I have a lot of thoughts on a lot of those subjects.
Right?
I just understand that the amount of dust that gets spun up when these things get discussed. So
I just think the alternative media landscape is very much oversaturated with what seemed to be, intelligence assets put into position strategically to influence the fleeing masses from the death of the mainstream media who are being re-corralled.
Sir, do you mean former Navy SEALs that suddenly pop up with a full-blown studio and all the guests that Joe Rogan has?
Right. Let me tell you something
those
about.
The people you mean?
Let me tell you something. For the last, and Heidi can vouch because I said this months ago. I said, you watch, Joe Rogan is going to start talking about becoming a Christian, and and I went on, and I said, there's this disingenuine Christian conspiracy podcaster movement. And just recently, my husband brought this to my attention. Joe Rogan's been talking about going to church and I said, I fucking told all of you. I said, you wait, it's gonna happen. And I'm just saying, as much as there's a Laurel Canyon of anything else, there's a Laurel Canyon of podcasting. Just to kind of sum up something that I had thoughts on the Solar Temple really quick. After I read Program to Kill and a couple other books, I thought it was important. And then I read a book about the Solar Temple after I saw it on Ancient Aliens like a year or two ago. People don't have time to like sit and consume information in the way that a lot of other people do. Like for me, I actually like reading. Like that was one of the things I like to do before I started a podcast, but people don't consume information in that way anymore. So I feel like it's really cool that we could take a subject like the Solar Temple. Like there's probably tons of books and shit written about it. There's obviously Program to Kill is a book. Strange Scenes Inside the Canyon was a book. You take it and you make it consumable podcast style for people to just have like conversations about it. And I think it makes it more easily digestible. And that's why a lot of these weird subjects are coming back to the forefront after all these years, is because podcasters are making like podcast versions of books, and the information is more readily accessible. And that's why I love listening to podcasts, right? Because you get like Nick's perspective, Austin's perspective, Heidi, JJ, and I obviously have my own perspective, but it's these same topics. Like, how many people are going to go and be like, oh, I'm at the library, I wonder if I can get a book about weird cults today. Nobody's doing that. But
even if they did, to your point, it's so important to have it's going to stand out different for you, for Nick, for me, for JJ, for Austin. I think you're right. I think this is so critical.
Yeah, I mean, they will listen to a podcast, but they won't read the book, right? How many times have I said in podcasts, oh, you should read this book, you should read this book? Nobody's going to read the fucking book. They just want me to talk about it. You know what I mean?
I've been thinking about reading books, but I don't like to talk do that about either. That's boring to me.
Yeah.
I like to summarize it. You know what I mean? I don't like to read. I like to summarize it. You know what I mean? My understanding of what you're describing.
I just think
no one reads shit.
No, but I think that most of us have been conditioned into this sort of, one the attention span has been deliberately and intentionally shortened for this purpose. And I think that's in order to effectively place you in the trap of the ideological prison. And you most people aren't even aware that, right, they remain in these chains of and of ideological subversion that is clearly kind of corrupting their ability to even engage with reality in any sort of objective way and in an honest way. And I think that with that comes this lack of discipline, which comes the lack of effort. And it's just now we've been conditioned to become these just lazy, undereducated, but I mean, it's not within the context of public education or the system itself, right? I mean, actual information, right? Like and that's another thing is who's studying like primary source documents and trying to pull.
They're not.
Yeah, exactly.
They're not. I mean, I'm a 90s kid, and I remember like so looking forward to this stupid fucking book fair and like actually getting books and shit and like asking my mom for money to like get books at the stupid fucking book fair. Like, I think the 90s kids are like the last generation of kids who were made to read in school, and like you would have homework of reading this book and like coming back, and like I loved that shit. And I still to this day I'll be like, oh my god, I found this book about, I mean, there's a bookshelf behind me, my husband's collected all these books. But I think, yeah, I mean, podcasts are just like people talking about interesting books and shit that they've read that other people are not going to read. And I think it's very important, because if you can't Google it these days, it's just like, I guess the information's not out there. Like,
right.
okay.
Yeah. Exactly.
I've had people on the show that's what they do for podcasting is review books.
Yeah. I mean, it's important, I think.
Oh yeah.
But anyways, I didn't want to tangent too far. I just wanted to say I do think that the solar temple is one of the subjects among many that have been documented throughout time, but it's just coming to the forefront now because people don't go searching for this information. They're not interested in reading stuff. They're not interested in, diving deep into weird rabbit holes about stuff like that. So
yeah, but some of that's intentional, right? It's the magic show. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. It's just two weird French dudes who had a bug up their ass, right? Who murdered a bunch of people underground tunnels. Like that's what they want you to believe is they just set a bunch of random idiots on fire. And it's it's their fault because they were part of a cult.
You need to tell me that's not actually occurred here.
Oh no, the same with Heaven's Gate, the same with a lot of these cults. They want you to believe it's a lone nut, right? Who starts a cult and murders everybody. And that's just the end of the story. There she wrote.
I got so many ideas on Heaven's Gate. I mean, you want to talk about mind control? They called themselves Guinea and Pig.
Yes, I know they did.
I mean, what are you talking about?
Doe and T, all these weird fucking names. Yeah.
They came from mental hospital, right?
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
Those people
Bonnie Nettles. Yeah, I fucking know all about the Heaven's Gate assholes. And in the end, it's more cult ritualism. Shave your head, become androgynous, castrate yourself. And now poison yourself. Wear Nikes, gives a whole new meaning to just do it. Okay.
How much do you think Nike paid to get in on that psyop? How much do you think Nike paid to get in on that psyop? That had to be a good marketing.
I mean, come on.
No PR is bad PR. Everyone still talks about them black Nikes. I got my own pair in my closet here with my purple
I've
robe.
talked about the Nikes before, okay? The same way that they promoted the fucking Nikes in Forrest Gump, the running shoes. Nike shows up on all kinds of weird places if you're really looking for it.
You mean the ancient Greek god? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. Well, just saying. Solar Temple did not get off the hook for me as just being like two fucking weird French dudes that set a bunch of people on fire. It cannot be that simple.
Not at all. There's no way, in my opinion, and there was a letter, by the way, that was clearly, it was written after the fact. It was supposed to provide a motivating factor for the murders, right? That was discovered, and it's really strange. It essentially, and by the way, there's an anonymous. This is a clue, right? as far as these 2 anonymous letters that were sent to these Swiss newspapers. And the first was a 22-page document that said the deaths were an act of transition from this world and gave sufficient details of the order's activities to make clear that this author was apparently deeply involved in them. So obviously insinuating that he's a member of the OTS. And it's interesting because obviously if you look at these letters and also consider the fact that the envelope was analyzed and it showed that it had been posted in Geneva at 11 a.m. on Wednesday. And this is long after the fires had been put out, right? So it's an interesting timing, to say the least. And you have the author who apparently was attempting to delude investigators into thinking he was part of a suicide pact. He wrote, "To everyone who can still hear the voice of wisdom, we address this final message. It is with boundless love, unspeakable joy, and no regret at all that we leave this world."
That's coming from Joseph DiMambro?
This is anonymous. Anonymous letters sent to Swiss newspapers.
Supposedly from the cult, right?
This is the claim, yes, is it's
see, this is another thing that makes me think this is all just set up bullshit. Exactly. Because it's like they got to make this scary letter. Like, you know, oh, I'm peeing my panties now. They sent this fucking letter about so long farewell. Avita saying we're burning ourselves. Like, this doesn't make any sense to me. They have to have like some scary letter that they send. Like, we did this to ourselves and and then you really look into the forensic medications and what. Right. They got poisoned and shot in the head. And okay, who wrote the letter? Which one wrote the letter? Because they were all murdered.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
And that you know, begs the question: why are all these? As far as it, at the very least, it in a way explains the fact, right, that you had all these police raids that occurred in these on these apartments in Geneva after this took place. And apparently there was a second letter, right, that was they were both sent the same time. But this second letter happened to denounce the way in which the cultists transition from life, right, had taken place, and seemed to attack Duré's incompetent and deviant behavior, allegedly barbaric, even was what it was called in the letter. And it was also posted at the same time, 11 a.m. on the Wednesday, which is, you know, hours after the fires had been put out, as they said. So the police apparently believed at the time that these authors of both of the letters were still alive in Geneva, obviously, right, because the fires have already been put out. So these are members of the cult who clearly knew of the mass death and then provided these letters that allegedly gave the motivation for which the cult members were, you know, pursuing this mass death, revolutionary mass suicide. And so, yeah, he says that at least the police and the authorities, they claimed that these individuals were potentially still in Geneva at the time and were directly connected to the deaths in the two villages. And then they subsequently raided apparently a long list of apartments in Geneva that were connected to this investigation. And that's why you have like evidence in Cherie and Salvan and Morin Heights that also undermine the theory of collective suicide, because you had 15 bodies found not in the two chalets that burnt down, but in a third chalet where timing devices, as I mentioned before, had failed to set off the fire. And you had these witnesses, right, that said it was clear that the farm owner had died before the fire on Tuesday night. The corpse was cold, long cold. He must have died by the previous afternoon, they said, apparently one witness claims. And the discovery of these drugs, once again administered to the cultists at Cherie by injections or intravenous drip, gave further reason for individuals investigating the case to believe that the death was
IV? Really?
Yeah, man.
This is some fucked up fuckery. I mean, an IV drip.
Sounds like the
IV drip.
Oh, yeah.
What'd
Right?
you
Yeah.
say, JJ?
Yeah, that too. Sounds like the Zizians again.
Zizians.
The Zizian
But the
cult.
plastic bags on some of the victims' heads, apparently,
That's like Heaven's Gate. They
they
put fucking
said-
plastic bags on their heads.
you know what they said? That the reason being was they excused it. There was a justification that Joray himself, Luke Joray, said his group had used plastic bags in rituals to symbolize humanity sinning against nature.
Well, they were conditioned all the way around.
Well, you'd have to be because, you know, and I don't know if we're about to wrap up or what, but just think of the mindset you'd have to want to do something like this to yourself. It sounds like most of them didn't want to, and they were just murdered, which makes more sense to me because I'm not going down. I'm not killing myself in this way over some retarded stuff like this. But it's like, let's say that some of them did kill themselves. You must have to be so completely under the control of these two guys,
right?
That it would sound better to die than to continue living without them.
I think they just poisoned them after the fact. They got them to sleep, and then
Yeah, I mean that makes more sense to me.
Oh yeah,
I would agree. And considering that, as I mentioned multiple times, just the wealthy nature of many of the recruits and initiates of the OTS, like you had members of the cult, like one of the members' wives inevitably sued DeMambro, right? I believe she sued the cult and ended up receiving a 95,000 pound out of court settlement. And so there was definitely like and this is all leading up to the mass deaths. And so you had police discovering that the OTS had even infiltrated the province's electric power company in Quebec, Canada, right? Hydro-Quebec is the name. And this is, as I said before, where a number of these bombings of transmission towers had taken place the exact same year as the infiltration of the OTS members. And Jure was even convicted of illegal possession of weapons in 93, just before the deaths all began to happen in 94. And so, he was even and he was.
There was a tape, right, about them talking after the fact, right?
Oh
Nick's
yeah,
shaking his head. Yeah.
So they're dealing in guns, right?
Oh yeah, yep.
So
and money
they're
laundering.
Speaking of tapes, they're on tape discussing the Branch Davidians beat them to the punch.
Yes, that's what it was
exactly
that I'm
what it
thinking
was.
of. Yes.
And the Branch Davidians are dealing guns, and I suspect they're dealing guns through what is known as the Midwest Depot, this secret CIA depot in northern part of San Antonio, Texas, located on Camp Bullis Air Force Base.
That's where they said the institution was. That David Koresh and at least, I believe, 7 of his inner circle were allegedly programmed at the institution by an MK Ultra operative that was in that area. And
you know what I'm talking about.
Oh yes, and it turns out through the Paul Wiltshire connection that I mentioned earlier, right? That journalist who was assassinated said he knew more than Danny Castellero. It was through that contact, that CIA domestic, operative who claimed to be the pilot in the October surprise. He also claimed that David Koresh was under mind control. He was essentially, they were programmed to pursue the creation of a bomb. And that they were actually trying it's very interesting. They said that many Green Berets, there was a program that was set up where Green Berets would be domestically, brought back to the U.S. domestically, and then
20th Special Forces.
Yeah.
Was it Dr. Sirhan? Was it Dr. Hypnotist Sirhan guy?
Oh my God. Right. Like it's the same connection.
Somehow the Branch Davidians, my husband was telling me, somehow the Branch Davidians inspired the Oklahoma City bombing stuff.
Yeah.
And what was that guy's name? The
Timothy
Oklahoma
McVeigh
City
was
bombing.
there. Yeah.
Timothy McVeigh. That's right. Somehow.
And they're all connected to the order in Idaho.
Yes.
I think David Koresh is a severely misunderstood character, in my opinion.
Same.
And I think, I've covered him in my cult series, but yeah, that's a whole other with the Ruby Ridge and everything. There's an
absolutely.
HBO series on that, by the way.
I think that 20th Special Forces group is a key thing to understand there, Austin, that you're pointing out.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's this fascinating cavdef.org, George from cavdef. He's super cool dude. He has provided, quite a bit of the resources available at cavdef.org, that as far as like he's put together a very long list of, let's say there's one on mind control programs, there's one on the Son of Sam, even just right, that goes into very deep levels of research. It's a great resource, but this is where I first discovered the alleged connection, right, between the potential mind control wrinkle to the Waco siege, which just blew me away. Because Waco was one of my red pill moments. I'm very much it was really Ruby Ridge, Waco, and OKC that woke me up. That I related so much to Sammy Weaver, right? Sammy Weaver, the little boy out on the farm with his dog and his gun, and that's how I was raised. I mean, I grew up on a 35-acre farm in Northwest Arkansas. It was just like I related directly to this. And
sure,
it
a lot of these activities in that region, right? The region you're talking about, where you grew up in.
Exactly. And it's really just a perfect window into, the very least, what your government is capable of, right? And it's kind of the way that I look at it. But David,
and there was all those special forces guys you're talking about throughout all this stuff, from Fort Bragg operating through the 20th Special Forces group, like the infamous Mena, Arkansas pilot for the Medellin cartel trafficking of Iran-Contra coke into America. Barry Seal, likely member of the Society of Cincinnati, member of the 20th Special Forces.
So crazy.
So if you were going to give the Solar Temple a rating from 1 to 10 jock straps of how connected to,
let's go 10 jock straps.
You're going 10 jock straps.
I'm betting the bank. I'm betting 10 jock straps.
All right. I'm gonna bet 8 jock straps on the Solar Temple. I've heard crazier, but they're up there, right? They got to be up there. They got connections. They got weirdness. Dude. They got burnt bodies. They've got 3 different, events happening over the span of a couple of years. I'm going.
Don't forget, they're on both sides of the pond. They're on both sides. They've gone international on both sides of the pond here, Julia. They're very prolific.
All right. Yes. I amend my rating. I'll give it 9 jock straps. Nick, where are you?
9.2.
If you had to rate it,
give it a rating. 9.2 jock straps.
Let me. I gotta go piss.
7 or 8.
Go piss real quick. I'll be right back, and then I'll give my final thoughts on that, and I'll be right back, guys.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Weird.
What did you say, Nick? 7?
I think it's 7 or 8, and the reason why it's getting a lower rating is because I do think it's probably intelligence behind that. I think if there was actually organic, I'd be like, oh, that's fucking crazy.
Yep.
You make a solid point. I'm going to redo my vote. I'd like to redo my vote. I'm going to downgrade them for being French. So I'm going to give them a 5.
Oh,
I'm going to give them a 6 because I am certain if I study hard enough on this, Bouvier is going to come up because of the French connection, and this shit is going to go wild.
So you're
challenge accepted, ma'am.
5?
Challenge accepted.
Yes.
5 to jock straps, Heidi?
Yes, I said 6. Yeah.
Oh, you said
I'm gonna
6.
go. Actually,
okay.
I'd like to offer a new. I'd like to redo mine. To give them 0 jock straps because they're French.
0.
Just because I'm just saying there is some fuckery about. There is so many. He's mentioned in other podcasts that I watched prepping for this. He's mentioned some people that he didn't go all the way up the line, like Thane Eugene Caesar, and I'm like, keep going. Go
people in the comment section also should rate. People in the comment section need to rate 1 to 10 jock straps for the Solar Temple. Just curious what the listeners think out there, because I'm reading the comments.
Austin's jock strap review.
Yeah, Austin, the jock strap 1 to 10.
God. So I think we're at. I mean, definitely, I'm 10 out of 10. I believe this was Operation Gladio all day long. And I think that, again, as I said before, like, why, for who is DeMambro crossing borders with massive sums of money? That's one major
NASA's.
No one, and and also like we have like 2 French policemen who were stationed in Annemasse, right? The alleged assassins who basically were supposed to have been involved, right? In essentially what happened was there was Charles Pascal, right, was directly in as far as a few days before the Vercors massacre, right? These 2 alleged assassins go to the Ministry of the Interior, headed by Charles Pascal, who's directly involved in the local Gladio connections that are playing out with the OTS, and this is a few days before the Vercors massacre happens. And so I think that this is like deliberate connection to the plot, that this is how we're carrying it out. The plan is being hatched at this moment. And there's a fascinating link as far as these sort of organizations, right? The Grand Lodge de France and all these belong to this sort of, it was called the GLNF Opera. And it was essentially like this umbrella organization, and it kind of like really just like you had, a commander of the OSMTJ involved as well. Then which is obviously you have this Martinist order, the renovated order of the Temple, the ORT connection that's involved here, the head of which, right, was propelled this collaborator Julian Rodriguez, who is in my mind the direct connection to Luc Jouret for the Gladio dynamic. And that's what I find so interesting here, right, is that you have essentially, with Julian Rodriguez, his background is so strange, right? And he's connected in with essentially you have like the rectified Scottish Rite that's involved, ancient and accepted Scottish Rite. There's all these different versions that seem to overlap with each other, but the
dark rites right. are the ones.
Exactly.
The Cagliostro ones that go the other way. Yeah.
Right. And so I think that, it's the Freemasonry links too very much interest me, as well, because I just think that it's hard to ignore, at the very least, that you have Jacques Breyer and Aleister Crowley, even I think with the White Brotherhood, as far as in many ways the Great White Brotherhood is very, and the Great White Lodge. Much of this is sort of just at least baked in Crowleyism in a way, right? Where you kind of have a lot of
so much further. Yeah, it's like Mystery Babylon. This goes back to Chronicon and Mystery Babylon. This is so much further, but then everybody perverts it their own way, whichever flavor.
So Austin is going 10 on that. I mean, I feel like you could go 10 just based off of the body count,
right?
Because it's much like Jonestown. Jonestown gets 10 jockstraps for me just because of the
right?
Or 10 flavor aids, 10 grape drinks, whatever.
Right.
It just off the body count. I mean, Solar Temple, it's one of those high up ones. Kind of. I told Nick about a cult called the Restoration of the 10 Commandments of God. They've got a body count like at least 1,000 people, so they get a 10 for me again, just based off of the Restoration of the 10 Commandments.
He had a clip at one point, right?
Dude, he roasted at least 750 people in a church, so he gets 10 roasted booty holes for just based off the body count.
Go, Julia! Oh my gosh,
these cults are crazy, dude. These cults are crazy. Solar Temple is wild,
So, yeah, absolutely. But I think so the Rodriguez connection, I think we definitely should I should at least tie that in directly to Jouret, because I do think that that's like a smoking gun, honestly, in terms of the Gladio connection to the OTS, right? And beyond the fact that you have like this very strange Luciferian International that I mentioned before, that made like these announcements that seem to be very much as far as like the foundational principles of the OTS as it was being formed by DeMambro. And I think that you essentially you have like this you have basically where the Green Order, they make this announcement, right? This Luciferian, you had not only the Green Order, but the Grand Lodge of the Dragon, the Celtic Brotherhood, apparently the Aryan Order, the Sons of Fire, and the Lucifer Gesellschaft, which was the Luciferian Lucifer Society that was based in Cologne at the time. And they made this crazy ass announcement that said the time has come for a solid union of all our societies. It is high time that the sons and daughters of Hyperborea raise the flame of the new times and of the divine Superman, heir of the Grail and of the Boreal crown. From Shambhala, the holy city of Agartha, comes this polar message: unite. And then you have these representatives of the Luciferian associations who met in Brussels in 75. And this is crazy because it even has like this, what was, they claimed was in order to seal the charter of unification of the legions of Mithras. Like this is the terms that they utilized, which is just, that's just extraordinarily
Babylon right there. Yeah,
exactly. Yep. We're talking the age of Aquarius or modern Babylon in my mind, which is kind of like what I think we're kind of in this environment where we're in.
Look at the symbolism look at the Vatican. It looks like a keyhole. The Mormon Church just copied them. It's a keyhole. The Onassis Foundation is a keyhole. Go look at all these things. They all have the same information. They're just in their own factions. It's the mob.
Right. Absolutely. And I'll wrap up real quick, Nick. I'm sorry. Yeah. It's this part right here I think is worth mentioning because it's the age of Aquarius is upon us. They are at the very least attempting to kind of usher this in more ways than one.
Luke was into that idea too, wasn't he?
Oh yes, and the Green Order themselves, during this time specifically, they had made this proclamation that it is indispensable to unite all the polar and solar forces before the age of Aquarius. And the new man, the Superman, must be ready to take the destiny of humanity into his own hands. Because when the most critical moment of the Black Age comes, there will be only one people left to carry the flame: us. An Aryan order of chivalry must be created, and an elite of superiors must be formed who hold the secrets possessed by our ancestors in the Polar Empire. And this Julian Rodriguez that I keep mentioning, who's directly tied in with DeMambro and Gladio, he happened to be well known in these far-right circles in the 70s and had connections with this neo-fascist movement in Italy. And so it's Gladio instantly, because in addition to the Green Order, Rodriguez happened to be a member of, by the way, he also was a member of the International Luciferian, right, which is just Luciferian International, and the Center Templier de Turis, I think is how you pronounce it, but it's Historique, Philosophique, et Esoterique, right, which is just basically how it was pronounced as far as the organization in this. It's interesting though, because the Grand Master of this Swiss branch of the OSMTJ, right? OSMTJ, if you don't know, it's the Sovereign Military Order of the Temple of Jerusalem, which is interesting considering Joseph DeMambro's connection to Israel. I also did find important, but you had these essentially you had members of this Luciferian International who were trafficking weapons in connection with P2 that was headed by Licio Gelli at the time. And what he was utilizing Julian Rodriguez for much of these covert operations. And so that you had all these raids carried out, right, by Italian authorities at Lucio Gelli's place and everything. But it inevitably connected back to the OSMTJ and the formation of these strange Masonic allies right. But the smoking gun comes in the form of, in 1981, right, Rodriguez becomes acquainted with Luc Jouret, Belgium ex-military official with ties to Gladio, right? So that is Rodriguez, who Jouret was also happened to be a friend of this Italian fascist linked to Gladio by the name of Claudio Muti. Muti, follower of Franco Freda, one of the leading neo-Nazi and neo-fascist intellectuals of the post-war Italian far right. Freda belonged to the MSI, which was a neo-fascist political party in the Italian social movement. And he began to criticize its leadership, and as far as saying that it was taking on this Nazi Maoist inclination. But it turns out that you have this strange, group of R, right? AR, based on the philosophy of Julius Evola, and managed this far-right library. Freda described himself apparently as an admirer of Hitler, and he participated in the activities of the Ordine Nuovo, and was convicted later, acquitted even, for lack of evidence for involvement in the Piazza Fontana bombing. So clearly we're talking about that paramilitary underground that I had referenced earlier, with the Wackenhut connections to all of this. And so the final point here is that from a very young age, Muti himself, which again is Claudio Muti, directly linked as an Italian fascist to Gladio, friends with Jaurès. And it turns out that Muti, he joined the MSI, but was expelled, and then joined the Grec member Jean-Francois Thuriart's Young Europe, GRECE, also known as the Research and Study Group of European Civilization. Thuriart, together with Jaurès and Joseph de Membro, members of AMORC, associated with Jacques Breyer, had helped organize a split in the Communist Party of Belgium in the 1970s, creating the party, this Nazi Maoist party that was, it was basically called the PCE, and so this party was, which succeeded to basically this Jeune Europe, I believe is how you pronounced it, but Young Europe is what it was really, what all that it referenced, right? That's all it translates to, and this is a neo-fascist Euro-nationalist movement formed by Jean Thuriart in Belgium, and this group was allegedly controlled by the SDRA 8, which is a branch of Belgium's Gladio. So that is where the direct connection to Luc Jaurès comes into play. Claudio Muti, Julian Rodriguez, and that all brings in the scope of the International Luciferian Green Order. It's fascinating stuff, but I think that's really just the crux of the point that I wanted to make, was that it goes so deep into the levels of connections to the Gladio operation at the time, the strategy of tension, obviously the what they were really trying to do is create an environment of destabilization, right? More than anything. So it's just a fascinating thing to me. And I think that Gladio never ended either. Right. It resurfaces in full force in terms of the Omar Mateen Pulse nightclub shooting. Even I couldn't believe he was a security guard for G4S Secure Solutions, which just so happened to be the renamed version of the Wackenhut security organization, which was directly tied in as a CIA front to stage Gladio operations in the strategy of tension. So
you ain't kidding, sir. It never ended, did it?
I know no. And I know that was a lot of names, and I apologize, but I do think it's very important to at the least kind of trace this record of Gladio connections, at least at some surface level, just to kind of reinforce the reality that this was definitely an intelligence operation, right? So that's my personal
that's for sure, and that's why we see the connections, right, with like PACCON and stuff like that. I think that's one of the biggest key points to take away from all this conversation is the Gladio never ended. It's still going on, and we see it right there. We see it with what I call Idaho Contra, in my opinion. We see a lot of different things, right? But we see it with these comparisons to PACCON, and that quote from Heidi earlier that we were talking about with they were talking about, the Branch Davidians beat them to the punch. Folks can check that quote out from a book that compares these cults, the Branch Davidians and everything else. And it's called Apocalypse: Observed Religious Movements and Violence in North America, Europe, and Japan. So they do a direct comparative analysis in that book. And I would like to note that the author of that book, a Philip Daniel Schuler, is a Van Rensselaer Schuler, direct paternal descendant of Colonel Schuler of the New Jersey chapter of the Society of the Cincinnati. I'm not saying he's a member. I'm just saying, he's certainly in the mix.
So, JJ, does that mean you're amending your rating? Because you gave them 0 jock straps.
I'm going to go ahead and amend my rating to -5 jock straps because they're French.
Oh, come on.
Oh, my God.
Oh, boy.
-5?
Yeah, they're French. I mean, I'll give them -10. Watch out.
They're French.
They're French.
Well, I
What
did
the
also
hell?
want to say somebody in the comments section said that they appreciate my dark sense of humor, and thank you.
As always, for
Because,
sure.
As
yeah,
well, I
know.
do.
I appreciate your dark
feel
sense of humor.
Thank
Same.
you, guys. I mean, I feel like, yeah, this is horrible. A lot of people burnt up and died. But, I mean, everything is also at the same time open for being a joke.
Look,
But-
if you can't, we all got to continue life as it is, and if you can't make a joke about it, what good is it?
Definitely get
Dog.
it.
You're laugh or
Right.
cry, and we got more to do, right?
Yeah.
I'll
I
just
gotta
be-
say though, this was very informative, even after looking into the solar temple myself. What I would consider to be a pretty good deep dive. You surpassed me in a lot of the things that I was
Big time.
looking into. So yeah, Austin, great job.
Thank you
Barn
very much.
burner, as
Big
JJ
barn.
would
That's
say.
a hell of a barn burner right there.
I
sir.
will
I
say
appreciate your
that-
time and discourse for sure.
Not the barn, not the barn. I mean, house.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. No, not that one.
Yeah,
hilarious.
yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
the-
Sorry.
The
I will,
podcast thumbnail has a house burning that I made.
Oh, my
Nice.
God. I
It's
will
fitting.
say,
It's
man.
very fitting,
Yeah, I
figuratively and literally.
I forgot most of these details because it's been quite a while since I did my deep dive into it, and just coming out the other end of this Atlanta case, like my mind is oversaturated with those details of that case, obviously at this moment, and so I would have preferred to have done a little bit more prep, get back affiliated with
Thought it was
the
great.
deeper
I
level.
thought it was good.
Oh, dude, you did a great
Yeah.
job, dude.
Thank
for
you.
real.
Yeah.
But I definitely would have remembered more of these details.
I don't know how that's possible, sir.
Well,
I think
well,
we would have
thank you very
derailed you, and it would have been as much as now.
Well, you
This is
did
perfect.
amazingly better than Ancient Aliens. So if you can at least do better
You
than
leave John
Ancient
Podesta's
Aliens,
friends alone. You leave John
That's
Podesta's
so
friends
funny.
alone.
Oh my God. But the
my
the
gosh.
only thing I have left to say really is just that what Alex Constantine said, in his archived version of like his story of the OTS and kind of the bridging of he kind of made a lot of these Gladio connections and very much I appreciated him reinforcing a lot of the details in certain ways and what he had said, basically the way he ended his piece. I found this to be so poignant, in terms of this case. And it's kind of what I mentioned earlier as far as just what he suggests, obviously, is that the combination of international arms smuggling, BCCI, presented a familiar enough picture of CIA sedition. The cult's connection to BCCI, reported in Europe but filtered from American newspaper accounts, fed speculation among Canadian journalists that followers of DeMambro and Jaurès were killed to bury public disclosures of gun running and money laundering. But the fraternizing of America's national security elite and the cults did not begin in Cherie, Switzerland. The Order of the Solar Temple was but the latest incarnation of mind control operations organized and overseen by the CIA and the Department of Defense. I just thought that was beautiful because
That
I
is,
honestly
man. That
believe,
is for sure. Very
perfect way
poignant.
to sum it up. Mhm.
right? I just think it's too often the case, in my opinion, with many of these scandals, right? But I was thoroughly convinced that this was a very sophisticated cover up, and it's
You ain't kidding.
unfortunate, but tends to be the case. With,
Sophisticated yet sloppy. In
Yeah,
And
my opinion.
ongoing.
Right.
And ongoing.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
sophisticated yet, but it's
Agreed.
right up there. And like I said, you did a great job. I learned a lot. And I'm sure I can't speak for Nick, but I think he dug into some shit that I was not even aware of.
That's why I said instead of covering it myself, I'll just have him come on.
Thank you, Nick, by the way. I really appreciate you, brother. And JJ, you as well. And Julia, Heidi, like, it's really nice to meet you guys officially. Like, I've known of you guys for quite a while, but I was looking forward to this because I was hoping, once again, like, the more interaction I can have with like-minded people like yourselves, like, I'm so grateful for this. Like, it's, it's something that gives me purpose, man. And that's very
Definitely.
In this moment in time. Everyone should be desperate for this, and I think that most people are. And this is the reason why they're subconsciously acting out in many ways, right? Because they might not be entirely aware of this, but yeah. Anyway, I just want to say thank you to all of you guys, and I appreciate you guys, for giving me this opportunity. Of course, man.
Yes, sir. I appreciate your time. I got a couple tabs open that every time we talk or I listen to your all show the other day, I got a couple tabs open here to check out. So, and I'm definitely looking forward to our conversation here in the future on Operation GCD.
Awesome. I love meeting new conspiracy friends. Shit, I met my husband conspiracy podcasting thanks to Nick. So
Nick's the matchmaker for you and Colby. Oh, there you go. Nice.
I mean, you never know who you're gonna meet. And honestly, I just wanted to say, to your point, it's great to be able to connect with people on that are on the same page. So yeah, love the conversation today. It was great.
Thanks. But she still loved it. She still loved it. I loved it too. Thank you so much.
Before JJ, you want to? Oh, all right, Julia, you want to let everybody know?
Out.
You want to try real quick just to let everybody know where they can find you?
Cosmic Peach, thanks for having me.
Oh yeah, great conversation there, Austin. I appreciate your time, sir. JJ Vance, Operation GCD. Not the vice president. Got Fridays tonight with Phil Z. That'll be an epic barn burning kind of conversation right there. And Julia, I hope you bring your dark humor to the review of Ghost Story next Wednesday night on Operation GCD Live.
You can count on it. You can count on it.
Heidi, always appreciate the time, ma'am. And look forward to our occult and esoteric review of So I Married an Axe Murderer, one of my favorite films. That's coming up in 2 weeks on Operation GCD Live.
Nice.
And then Operation GCD Sundays this weekend here. I got 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Times or Daylight Times, whatever the fuck that means. I don't know the difference. It's going to be the Legends of Nathaniel Bar Jonah, and that's the homicidal, kid-diddling, cannibalistic, psychopathic serial killer whom I came face to face with in 2001 in Great Falls, Montana. And may or may not have served me human meat burgers at the Hardee's.
Oh my God, man!
Human ass burger.
A lot of comparisons around the cold activity surrounding this man in Great Falls, Montana, to the Son of Sam process activity in Minot, North Dakota, because the two cities are very similar with the same Air Force bases and the same missions in both locations. So,
Detective James
Rothstein
made that connection.
To never go to Hardee's.
Absolutely, he's a legend right there, isn't he? I'm a big fan of his research and work and what he's accomplished there in
Jimmy
life.
Boots, man, he makes me cry, man. I'm not even playing, like reading. Anyway, I won't get into it. But thank you guys, I appreciate you. Go ahead, keep going. I'm sorry.
No, I appreciate everyone's time. I just wanted to throw in some plugs there because again, I appreciate everyone's time, and I got some good shows with the Occult Rejects coming up, and Nick obviously will be there as well, and a couple of those at least.
Awesome.
Okay, and Heidi next. What is going on?
I am Heidi Love, Unfiltered Rise Podcast, everywhere podcasts are served, unfilteredrisepodcast.com. And that's where you can find me. Thank you so much, Austin, for your presentation. And to all of the Occult Rejects and Boss, thanks a lot. Jen's not here. I have to
say, you got to fill in for Jen the Wizard, right? You got to do it. You got to represent.
The organizer, that's enough. It's a lot.
Austin, please let everybody know they can find all the
things, brother. Man, again, Nick, thank you, brother. I appreciate you having me on for this. And I really, the Underclass podcast obviously is my my show, and And I have a show every Tuesday night at 9:30 Eastern time with Jose Galison from No Way Jose. And it's a good time. It's called Already Dead. And yeah, we basically schizo out for a good 45 and then do like a live interaction with patrons or call in as well at that point. But it's a good time. And also the best place to support me is definitely my Patreon. I have some incentives in place, at least one of them being even at the $3 level, like you can get my paywalled show called Whatever This Is with Brad Bankley and Sam Tripoli, which is a lot of fun. And beyond that, man. Oh yeah, I guess I should say I'm going to the Bohemian Grove event next week, so in Florida. So that'll be a lot of fun. Hopefully, some of the occult rejects might be there, but but either way, it'll.
Is that, I heard some cancellation activities around that.
I was gonna say that
it's been real dramatic.
On fire.
Yeah. It's back on though, huh?
Hey, at the very least, I got nothing but love for everybody involved, you know, and I think that, you know, things hopefully will at the very least hopefully we'll see some sort of I don't know, just
awareness.
Yeah. Well,
just
first of all,
yeah.
I just
well, differences aside, I mean, it sounds like you guys are able to get it together still there, right?
Exactly.
Like as far as the event goes.
Yeah, exactly. It's still happening.
That seems to be the most important part.
Had to change venues, but it is still happening. And I know Owen and Sam will still be there to perform. I know Shane Cashman's going to be the MC. And then I talked to Jake, Jake's producer last night, actually, Jake Shields, and he just hit me up and was like, for sure they're coming. So that'll be fun. At least like we'll actually have some legitimate personalities there to I think it's a beautiful.
Well, you're showing up, you mean? You said
Yeah,
legitimate. I mean, it all sounds like quite a lineup, but I mean, I was about to say, as far as any kind of research goes or groundbreaking information, I don't know if any of those fellas are beating you there, sir.
Oh man, thank you. But I will say, it'll be a lot of fun. I think as a networking opportunity alone, like just to kind of get to meet personally in physical form, some of the homies will be really nice, and
Sure.
And beyond that, man, stand on principle, right? Like just to be able to pursue the First Amendment, you know, just in this fashion. I think, especially in this moment, right, where there are so many various justifications to infringe upon the First Amendment, like we got to stand tall with these, you know, with these principles.
You ain't kidding.
Values.
You ain't kidding.
Conspiracy podcasting gets 10 jock straps.
Absolutely. Anyway, I'm done. Thank you guys. I appreciate you all.
Yeah, definitely check out that live show he does. I know JJ and Headless has jumped on recently.
I'm a big fan. You already did. I tune in. I'm usually typing around those hours. I tune in and listen a lot, but then I hear y'all say something. I'm like, I got to go comment on that one. That's a good one.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah. So definitely go check out that live. I was glad that you mentioned it, because if you didn't, I was going to bring that up. Thank you all again for coming on. Julia, JJ, Heidi, that's what's up. I love it. I really appreciate you guys being here. Austin, thank you so much, man. Again, don't worry about the rescheduling. It worked out the way it was supposed to.
Awesome,
So,
man. Thank you.
Here we go. And that is the end of another Occult Rejects. And thank you, everybody in the chat. That's what's up. We'll see you again later on tonight. That is the end of another Occult Rejects. Until the next one. Well, later.